Hey guys, tonight, the shadowy origins. The world as we know it today is often illuminated by the neon glow of modern commerce, the rapid pace of digital connection, and the loud, vibrant expressions of contemporary life. Yet beneath this veneer of the present lies a deep, quiet well of history, a well filled with secrets, forgotten rituals, and stories that have been smoothed over by the passage of time. Every year, on the 14th day of February, millions of people across the globe engage in a ritual that seems as natural as the turning of the seasons. They exchange cards adorned with lace and crimson hearts. They gift boxes of chocolates wrapped in silk ribbons. They whisper words of affection over candlelight. This is Valentine's Day, a day synonymous with romance, tenderness, and the celebration of the human heart. But if we were to peel back the layers of red paper and gold foil, if we were to look past the modern storefronts and the commercial artifice, we would find ourselves standing in a much colder, much darker landscape. The origins of Valentine's Day are not found in a candy shop or a florist's boutique, but in the dusty corridors of ancient Rome, in the blood-soaked arenas of forgotten martyrs, and in the pagan forests where the lines between the human and the divine were blurred by ritual and sacrifice. To truly understand why we celebrate love in the middle of February, we must first embrace the shadows. We must accept that history is rarely as clean or as sweet as a greeting card. The story of February 14th is a tapestry woven from threads of violence and piety, of wild lunar festivals and solemn religious decrees. It is a mystery that has puzzled scholars for centuries, a puzzle where the pieces don't always fit perfectly together. Imagine, if you will, the city of Rome nearly 2,000 years ago. It was a place of grandeur, yes, but also a place of deep superstition and raw primal energy. The month of February was not seen as a time of budding spring flowers, but as a period of purification. The very name of the month, Februarius, is derived from the Latin word februum, meaning purification or purgation. This was a time when the old year was dying and the new year was struggling to be born. It was a liminal space, a threshold where the spirits of the past were cleansed so that the future could take root. In this ancient setting, the air was thick with the scent of wood smoke and the anticipation of the Lupercalia, a festival so wild and strange that it would shock the modern sensibilities of any Valentine's Day celebrant today. It was a time of transition, where the boundaries of society were loosened and the raw forces of nature were invited into the city gates. We often think of love as a gentle thing, a civilizing force that brings peace to the soul. But in the shadowy origins of this day, love, or rather, the fertility and life force that preceded our modern concept of love, was something fierce. It was something that had to be beckoned with blood and ancient chants. As the centuries rolled on, the pagan echoes of the Lupercalia began to fade, but they never truly disappeared. They were overlaid by the rising tide of Christianity. This transition created a new kind of shadow, the shadow of the martyr. We speak the name Valentine as if it belongs to a single, clear figure in history, a patron saint of lovers who perhaps wore a smile and carried a quill. But the historical record tells a different, more fragmented story. In the early martyrologies of the Church, there is not just one Valentine, but several. There is a priest in Rome, a bishop in Tournai, and perhaps another who met his end in the distant province of Africa. These men lived in a time of great peril, when the Roman Empire was struggling to maintain its grip on power and viewed the growing Christian sect with suspicion and, at times, deadly hostility. The Valentine we celebrate today is a composite ghost, a figure formed from the overlapping shadows of these brave, doomed men. The stories told of them, of secret weddings performed under the cover of night, of healing the blind daughter of a jailer, of notes signed from your Valentine before a final walk to the executioner, are beautiful, haunting, and shrouded in the mists of legend. Are these stories true, or are they the pious inventions of a later age, designed to give a holy face to a day that refused to give up its pagan heart? This is the central mystery of the shadowy origins. We find ourselves at a crossroads where myth meets history. As you settle into your bed and the world outside begins to quiet, let your mind wander back to those flickering torchlit streets of the ancient world. Forget the pressures of the modern holiday. Forget the expectations of grand gestures and perfect gifts. Instead, listen to the wind as it blows through the ruins of the Palatine Hill. Listen to the scratch of a pen on parchment in a cold, damp Roman cell. We are beginning a journey through time, tracing the invisible threads that connect a chaotic Roman festival to the quiet exchange of a card in a suburban American home. It is a journey that will take us through medieval courtrooms where knights pledged their lives to fair ladies, through the workshops of Victorian artists who turned paper into lace, and into the boardrooms of modern corporations. But for now, we stay in the shadows. We stay in that quiet, uncertain space where the story begins. We acknowledge that love, like history, is complex. It is not always bright and sunny. It has its roots in the dark earth, in the sacrifices of the past, and in the enduring human need to find connection amidst the vast, cold emptiness of time. The mystery of February 14th is the mystery of ourselves, how we take the raw, often brutal facts of our existence and weave them into something sacred, something meaningful, and something that we call love. So take a deep breath, let the weight of the day fall away. As we move forward into the deep history of the Lupercalia and the secrets of the saints, remember that every tradition we hold dear was once a new and strange thing, born out of a specific moment in time, fueled by the same hopes and fears that we carry today. The shadows are not here to frighten us, but to remind us of the depth of our heritage. Welcome to the beginning. Welcome to the unseen threads of history. Let the story unfold slowly, like the petals of a winter rose, as we explore why, against all odds, we have chosen this particular day in the heart of winter to keep each other warm with the memory of a saint, the echo of a ritual, and the enduring power of the heart. Lupercalia, the wild feast. Close your eyes and let the modern world dissolve. Leave behind the sounds of traffic, the hum of electricity, and the glow of digital screens. We are traveling back, far back, into the deep echoing halls of time. We are standing in the heart of ancient Rome, long before the rise of the great cathedrals, during a time when the world was ruled by gods of the earth, the sky, and the wild, untamed places. We find ourselves in the middle of February, a month the Romans called Februarius. But this was not the romantic February we know today. There were no paper hearts, no boxes of chocolates, and no bouquets of long-stemmed roses. Instead, there was the scent of wood smoke, the damp chill of the Tiber River, and an underlying tension that pulsed through the cobblestone streets. This was the time of Lupercalia. To understand Lupercalia, you must understand the Roman mind. For the ancients, the world was a fragile place, held together by ritual and the favor of the divine. As winter began to wane, a sense of anxiety gripped the city. The stores of food were running low, the earth was still frozen and barren, and the survival of the community depended on the return of life. They needed a cleansing. They needed a spark of fertility to jumpstart the coming spring. Lupercalia was that spark. It was a festival of shadows and light, a wild feast that sat at the very edge of civilization and the primal wilderness. The ritual began at the foot of the Palatine Hill, in a dark, sacred cave known as the Lupercal. This was not just any cave. Legend whispered that this was the very spot where the she-wolf, the Luper, had found the infant twins Romulus and Remus, the founders of Rome. In the dim, flickering light of torches, a special group of priests gathered. They were known as the Luperci, the brothers of the wolf. These were not the solemn, robed priests of the high temples. No, the Luperci represented something more ancient, something that connected the city to its rugged, lupine beginnings. As the ceremony commenced, the air grew heavy with the smell of sacrificial fires. 2 male goats and a dog were brought forward. To our modern ears, this sounds harsh, but to the Romans, these animals were symbols. The goat represented fertility and the raw energy of the flock, while the dog represented the protection of the home. The blood was spilled upon the earth, a solemn offering to the gods of the wild, perhaps to Faunus, the horned god of the forest, or to the spirit of the she-wolf herself. Then came a moment that would seem surreal to any modern observer. 2 young Luperci were led to the altar. The priests took a knife, still warm with the blood of the sacrifice, and touched it to the foreheads of the young men. Then, in a strange act of purification, the blood was wiped away with a piece of wool soaked in milk. As the blood vanished, the young men were required to laugh. This laugh was not one of humor, but a ritualistic sound, a symbol of life returning, of the transition from the darkness of death back into the light of the living world. But the ritual was only beginning. The Luperci would then feast upon the meat of the sacrifice, drinking wine and preparing themselves for the most famous and perhaps most misunderstood part of the festival. They took the skins of the sacrificed goats and cut them into long, thin strips. These leather thongs were called February, the very word from which we get the name of our month. Armed with these purifiers, the Luperci stripped away their heavy garments. Clad only in loincloths made from the remaining goat skins, they emerged from the cave and began to run. Imagine the sight. The city of Rome, a place of laws and marble, suddenly filled with these wolfmen sprinting through the streets. They ran a circuit around the base of the Palatine Hill, tracing the ancient boundaries of the city. As they ran, crowds gathered. This was not a race to be watched from a distance. The people wanted to be part of the movement. Women, in particular, would line the path, reaching out their hands. They believed that if they were struck by the leather February held by the running priests, they would be blessed with fertility and an easy labor in the coming year. In the Roman mind, this was not an act of violence. It was a touch of magic. It was a cleansing stroke that chased away the barrenness of winter and invited the fruitfulness of spring. The city was being lashed into life. The stinging snap of the leather against skin was the sound of the world waking up. It was a chaotic, visceral, and deeply communal experience. It broke down the barriers between the rich and the poor, the noble and the slave, as everyone sought the same blessing of life and continuity. As the sun began to set over the 7 hills, the wild energy of the run transitioned into a night of revelry. The Lupercalia was a time of misrule. The normal social orders were suspended. There are tales, whispered through the ages, of a love lottery that took place during these festivities, where young men and women would draw names from a jar to be paired together for the duration of the festival, or perhaps for the entire year. While some historians debate the exact details of this lottery, the spirit of it remains consistent with the festival's purpose: the mingling of souls, the creation of new bonds, and the ensuring that the next generation would follow. This was a feast of the body and the earth. It was a celebration of the fact that we are animals, tied to the cycles of the moon and the seasons. The Romans understood something that we often forget in our climate-controlled, sanitized lives, that for anything to grow, something must first be cleared away. For love to bloom, the heart must be purified of the old year's grief. As you listen to the steady rhythm of these words, imagine the flickering shadows of those ancient torches on the stone walls of Rome. Feel the cool night air as it might have felt to a Roman citizen standing by the Tiber, hearing the distant shouts of the Luperci as they completed their sacred run. The Lupercalia was a bridge. It stood between the cold, dead silence of winter and the vibrant, chaotic noise of spring. It was raw, it was bloody, and it was beautiful in its honesty. Centuries later, the church would look upon these wild scenes with a mixture of concern and pragmatism. They saw a festival that the people loved too much to give up, a ritual that was woven into the very DNA of the city. And so, the shadows of the Lupercalia began to shift once more. The brothers of the wolf would eventually be replaced by the saints of love. The leather thongs would be replaced by paper cards. The blood would be replaced by the deep red of a rose. But as you drift closer to sleep, remember that the wild feast is still there, hidden beneath the surface of our modern traditions. Every time we celebrate Valentine's Day, we are, in some small way, acknowledging that ancient human need to be purified, to be blessed with life, and to connect with one another in the heart of the winter. Sleep now and let your dreams take you to the Palatine Hill, where the air smells of milk and honey, and the echoes of the ancient laugh of the Luperci still ring softly through the groves of time. The feast is over, the city is cleansed, and the spring is finally, quietly, beginning to stir. The thong of the goat. The night is deep, and the air of ancient Rome is thick with the weight of tradition. As you settle into the stillness of your own surroundings, let your mind travel back once more to the flickering torchlight of the Lupercal cave. We have touched upon the feast, and we have glimpsed the running priests, but now we must slow our pace. We must look closer at the artifacts of this ancient ritual, specifically the leather strips known as the February, or as history remembers them, the thong of the goat. This single object, a simple strip of hide, carries with it the entire weight of our transition from pagan ritual to the modern Valentine's Day. Imagine the texture of the hide. It is raw, dampened by the ritual milk and blood, smelling of the earth and the wild. For the Romans, this was not merely a piece of a dead animal. Through the sacred rites of the Luperci, the skin of the sacrificed goat had been transformed. It was no longer mundane, it was a conduit for the divine. It was a physical manifestation of the god Faunus, the wild protector of flocks. When the Luperci cut these strips, they were carving out pieces of protection, pieces of luck, and pieces of life itself. As the priests emerged from the cave, clad only in the skins of the very animals they had sacrificed, they became something other than human. In the eyes of the Roman citizens, they were the wolfmen. They represented the boundary where the city ended and the untamed forest began, and in their hands they gripped the February. As they began their rhythmic run around the Palatine Hill, the sound of their feet on the stones was joined by another sound, the sharp, whistling snap of the leather thongs cutting through the cold February air. To a modern observer, the sight of young men running through a city, striking bystanders with leather straps, would seem like a scene of chaos or perhaps even cruelty, but we must set aside our modern lenses to see the truth of the thong of the goat. For the women of Rome, the strike of the February was a coveted blessing. They did not shrink away in fear, they stepped forward. They bared their hands or their backs, inviting the sting. In their belief system, this was a holy touch. It was a spiritual cleansing. They believed that the energy of the goat, an animal famed for its vitality and reproductive power, was being transferred directly to them through the leather. Consider the symbolism of the strike. In the quiet, slow cycles of history, we see that humans have always looked for ways to shock the world back into productivity after the long sleep of winter. The thong of the goat was that shock. It was a wake-up call to the womb and to the earth. It was a reminder that life requires movement, friction, and at times, a bit of ritualistic fire. The sting was temporary, but the promise it held was eternal. The promise of a child in the cradle, the promise of a harvest in the field, and the promise that the family line would not fade into the shadows of the past. As the Luperci ran, the February became slick with the sweat of the runners and the mist of the Tiber. The ritual was exhausting, a test of endurance that mirrored the struggle of nature to overcome the frost. The priests were not just running for themselves, they were running for the soul of Rome. Every strike of the goatskin thong was an act of service to the community. It was a way of weaving the people together into a single, shared hope for the future. Now let your thoughts drift to the transition of this ritual. How does a blood-soaked leather strap from a Roman cave become the delicate lace of a Valentine's card? The journey is long and quiet. As the centuries passed and the Roman Empire began to embrace Christianity, the wild, raw edges of the Lupercalia began to be smoothed away. The church leaders found the ritual of the February to be too carnal, too tied to the old gods of the woods. They sought to replace the physical sting of the leather with the spiritual touch of the saint. Yet the human heart is stubborn. People did not want to give up their day of purification. They did not want to let go of the idea that February was a time for pairing and for the blessing of love. And so, the thong of the goat began to change its shape. The physical act of striking disappeared, but the essence remained. The idea of reaching out to another person, of making a connection that ensured a future together, stayed rooted in the soil of the culture. The February gave us the name February, but it also gave us the Valentine. In the Middle Ages, the tradition of the love lottery often involved drawing slips of parchment, slips that were, in a way, the paper descendants of those leather strips. Instead of a strike of leather to ensure fertility, a young man would present a slip of paper to a young woman to pledge his affection. The touch became a message. The raw power of the goat was replaced by the gentle imagery of the lamb or the dove. As you listen to the steady, calm narration, imagine the leather thongs being laid down for the last time. Imagine the Luperci fading into the mists of legend, their goatskin cloaks turning to dust. The streets of Rome grow quiet. The torches in the cave flicker out. But the intent behind the ritual, the deep, primal desire to be cleansed of the old and open to the new, remains as strong as ever. When you see a Valentine's card today, with its jagged, heart-shaped edges, perhaps you can see a faint shadow of the February. Perhaps the red ink is a distant echo of the sacrificial blood. We have not really changed. We have only refined our rituals. We still look for ways to tell each other that we are alive, that we are connected, and that we desire a future filled with warmth and growth. The thong of the goat is a reminder that our history is not always pretty. It is not always made of flowers and sugar. It is made of skin and bone, of sweat and earth, and of the desperate, beautiful human need to survive the winter. It is a story of how we take the wild things of the world and try to tame them with our traditions. Let your breathing slow down now. Feel the weight of your blankets, much softer than the goat skins of old. The ancient world is far away, a distant memory in the back of the human mind. The Lupercalia are at rest. The Palatine Hill is silent under the moon. The rituals are done, and the purification is complete. You are safe in the present, even as you carry the echoes of the past within you. Sleep now as the ghosts of the old Roman February drift away. The snap of the leather is gone, replaced by the silence of the night. The winter is still here, but the promise of the spring, the promise carried by the thong of the goat, is tucked away in the shadows, waiting for the sun to rise. The secret weddings of Rome. In the vast, sprawling history of the human heart, there are moments where silence speaks louder than the roar of empires. To understand the true weight of the legend we are exploring, we must return once more to the heart of the 3rd century. The year is approximately 270. The city is Rome, a city of marble, a city of shadow, and a city gripped by the iron will of a man known as Claudius the Cruel. As you settle into your bed, let the sounds of the modern world fade away. Imagine the distant echo of Roman sandals on cobblestone streets, the flickering of oil lamps in small, cramped apartments, and the heavy, humid air of a Mediterranean night. We are entering the hidden world of the secret weddings, where the act of love became an act of revolution. To understand why a simple marriage ceremony would be considered a crime against the state, we must understand the mind of the emperor. Claudius II was a man obsessed with the survival of Rome. The empire was under constant threat from Germanic tribes to the north and Persians to the east. The Roman war machine required a constant stream of young, strong, and dedicated men. But Claudius noticed a trend that troubled him. He believed that young men who were married, who had wives and children waiting for them at home, were less willing to leave their families to die on distant battlefields. Their hearts were soft, tethered to the hearth and the cradle, rather than the sword and the shield. In his cold, imperial logic, Claudius decided that the solution was simple. He would ban marriage. He believed that by making young men solitary, he would make them better soldiers. He wanted men who had nothing to lose but their lives, men whose only devotion was to the eagle of Rome. And so, the decree was issued. Across the empire, weddings ceased. The celebrations were silenced. The joining of hands and the exchange of vows became forbidden acts. It was a time of forced loneliness, where the state attempted to regulate the deepest impulses of the human soul. But in the shadows of this decree, a humble priest named Valentine was watching. Valentine was a man of peace in a time of war. He looked at the young couples who were being denied their right to a life together, and he felt a profound sense of injustice. To Valentine, marriage was not just a social contract. It was a sacred bond, a divine union that no emperor had the right to dissolve. He knew the risks. He knew that to defy the emperor was to invite the wrath of the law, a law that often ended in the arena or at the executioner's block. And yet, in the quiet of his heart, he made a choice. He would not let the lamps of love be extinguished. Imagine a secret meeting in the dead of night. A young couple, perhaps a soldier and a merchant's daughter, move quietly through the narrow alleys of the Subura district. They are hooded, their faces hidden, their breath visible in the cool Roman air. They reach a nondescript door, a place where the scent of incense lingers faintly. Inside, in a small, torchlit room, Valentine is waiting. There are no grand decorations, no choirs, no crowds of cheering relatives. There is only the priest, the couple, and the weight of their secret. In these hushed ceremonies, Valentine would take their hands. His voice, steady and calm, would recite the ancient vows, to have and to hold from this day forward. In the eyes of the law, these words were treason, but in the eyes of the priest and the lovers, they were the only things that truly mattered. By candlelight, Valentine would bless their union, joining them in a marriage that the world would never know about, but that they would carry in their hearts as they walked back into the dangerous reality of the city. These secret weddings of Rome became a quiet rebellion. Every time Valentine joined a couple, he was chipping away at the foundation of Claudius's tyranny. He was asserting that the heart has its own laws, laws that are older and more enduring than any imperial edict. As you drift closer to sleep, think about the courage it took to perform those rites. Think about the silence of those rooms, where the only sound was the crackle of a flame and the whisper of a promise. Valentine was not a warrior with a sword, but a warrior with a blessing. As the months passed, rumors began to circulate through the city. People whispered of a priest who could not be silenced, a man who believed in love more than he feared death. The legend tells us that dozens, perhaps hundreds of couples were married in secret under his guidance. It was a golden thread woven into the dark fabric of a wartime empire. Valentine became a symbol of hope for the youth of Rome, a reminder that even when the state tries to own the body, it can never fully claim the soul. But secrets in Rome were hard to keep. The eyes of the emperor were everywhere. Eventually, the reports of the secret weddings reached the palace. Claudius was furious. He saw Valentine's actions not just as religious defiance, but as a direct threat to the military strength of his legions. The priest was arrested and brought before the tribunal. The history of this moment is blurred by the mists of time, but the image remains vivid. The humble priest standing before the powerful emperor, defending the right of two people to love one another. Claudius, it is said, was actually impressed by Valentine's conviction. He attempted to persuade the priest to renounce his faith and follow the Roman gods, offering him a chance at life. But Valentine remained steadfast. He knew that his work was done. He had planted the seeds of a tradition that would eventually outlast the Roman Empire itself. He had turned the 14th of February, a day already heavy with the ancient rituals of the Lupercalia, into a day defined by a different kind of sacrifice. As you listen to the steady, rhythmic flow of this history, imagine the quiet dignity of those secret ceremonies. The Roman Empire is now a collection of ruins and museum pieces. The decrees of Claudius have long since turned to dust, but the idea of the secret Valentine, the one who stands up for love in the face of shadow, remains as vibrant as ever. We celebrate Valentine's Day today not because of an emperor's war, but because of a priest's peace. The secret weddings remind us that love often thrives best when it is hidden, when it is a quiet flame kept alive in the dark. In our modern world, we often make love a public spectacle, but the secret weddings of Rome teach us the value of the private vow, the shared secret, and the silent commitment. Let your breathing slow as you think of the torchlight fading in that small Roman room. The priest is gone, the couple has long since passed into history, but the blessing remains. The city of Rome is sleeping now, the ghosts of the Palatine Hill are silent, and the long, slow story of Valentine's Day continues to unfold. You are safe, you are quiet, and you are part of a lineage of lovers and dreamers that stretches back across the centuries. Sleep now and dream of secret gardens and whispered vows. The emperor's decree has no power here. The night is yours, and the history is a gentle river carrying you toward the morning. The secret is kept, the promise is made, and the heart is at rest. The secret weddings of Rome. Close your eyes, let the weight of your body sink deeper into the mattress. Imagine the modern world, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of a car on the street, the blue light of your phone, all of it is dissolving. It is melting away into a thick, cool mist. As that mist clears, you find yourself standing on a cobblestone path. The air is different here. It smells of wood smoke, damp stone, and the salty breeze of the Mediterranean. You are in Rome. But it is not the Rome of tourists and bright postcards. It is the Rome of the 3rd century, a city of shadows, a city of iron, and a city gripped by the cold, calculated will of an emperor. The year is approximately 270. The empire is vast, stretching its marble fingers across the known world, but it is an empire under pressure. At the center of this world sits Emperor Claudius II, a man history would remember as Claudius Gothicus. He was a man of the sword, a man of logistics, and a man who viewed the human heart as nothing more than a variable in his military equations. To Claudius, the strength of Rome lay in its legions. He needed young men who were fierce, men who were unattached, men who would charge into the Germanic forests or the Persian deserts without looking back over their shoulders. But Claudius noticed something that troubled his imperial mind. He saw that his young soldiers were distracted. They were soft. They were tethered to the hearths of their homes by the invisible strings of affection. He believed that a married soldier was a compromised soldier. A man with a wife and children has something to lose. He has a reason to hesitate on the battlefield. He has a heart that lives outside of his armor. In a moment of cold, pragmatic tyranny, Claudius issued an edict that sent a shockwave through the city. Marriage was banned. For the young men of Rome, the right to love, the right to pledge their lives to another, and the right to form a family were abolished by a stroke of a pen. Imagine the silence that fell over the city. No more wedding processions in the streets, no more traditional chants to the god Hymen. The bright saffron veils of the brides were tucked away in cedar chests, hidden under layers of dust. The world became a lonelier place. Young lovers met in secret, whispering their vows to the wind, knowing that the law viewed their devotion as a form of treason. This was the landscape of forced isolation. This was the great winter of the heart, imposed by the emperor. But in a small, nondescript house in a winding alley of the Subura district, a candle was burning. It was the home of Valentine, a priest who saw the world not through the eyes of an emperor, but through the eyes of a shepherd. Valentine was a man of deep, quiet conviction. To him, the emperor's law was a shadow, but the law of love was the sun. He looked at the young couples, the soldiers who were being sent to die without ever knowing the comfort of a spouse, the daughters of merchants who were being denied their future, and he felt a profound, holy rebellion stirring in his soul. Valentine decided that he would not let the emperor win. He would become the keeper of the flame. He began to send out secret messages. Whispers passed from hand to hand in the marketplaces. If your heart is true, come to the shadow of the vine. Valentine will hear you. Think of the atmosphere of those secret weddings. It is the middle of the night. The city of Rome is sleeping, but it is an uneasy sleep. The patrols of the Praetorian Guard march through the main thoroughfares, their armor clinking in the dark. But in the back alleys, two figures move like ghosts. They reach a heavy wooden door. They knock a specific rhythm. The door creaks open, and they are ushered into a small, flickering room. There in the center of the room stands the priest. Valentine does not wear the flamboyant robes of the state religion. He is dressed simply. In his hand, he holds a small scroll and a ring. The couple stands before him, their hands trembling, not just from the cold of the Roman night, but from the realization of what they are doing. They are committing an act of defiance. They are choosing each other over the empire. Valentine's voice is low, a soft baritone that fills the room with a sense of peace. He speaks of the sanctity of the bond. He speaks of a love that is stronger than death and older than Rome. There is no music, no banquet, no cheering crowd. There is only the crackle of the oil lamp and the weight of their whispered "I do." In that moment, the small room becomes the center of the universe. The emperor's decree is thousands of miles away, powerless against the simple joining of hands. Valentine was not just a priest. He was a craftsman of memories. He knew that these couples might only have a few days together before the soldier was shipped to the frontier. He was giving them a sanctuary, a secret garden of the mind that they could carry with them into the chaos of war. He was asserting that the individual soul has a right to its own destiny, a right that no government can fully strip away. As you listen to the rhythmic, steady flow of this story, imagine the courage it took for Valentine to perform these rites night after night. Each ceremony was a thread pulled from the tapestry of Claudius's power. Valentine was building a kingdom of the heart, one secret wedding at a time. He was the shadow priest, the one who kept the human spirit alive when the state tried to turn it into stone. But shadows are eventually chased away by the morning. The secret could not be kept forever. Rumors began to spread. The soldiers in the barracks whispered of a man who could bless their unions. The authorities began to take notice. The secret weddings of Rome became a legend that threatened the very discipline of the Roman army. Claudius, hearing of this defiance, ordered his guards to find the source. The story tells us that Valentine was eventually caught in the act. He was standing with a young couple, his hands raised in a final blessing, when the door was kicked open by the Roman guards. The light of the torches flooded the room, extinguishing the soft glow of the candle. Valentine did not run, he did not fight. He stood his ground, a man who had already won his war. He had proven that love is a fire that cannot be put out. It can only be driven underground, where it burns hotter and brighter. Valentine was led away in chains through the very streets where he had once walked as a free man. But as he passed, it is said that people looked out from their windows. their hearts swelling with a strange, new hope. They saw a man who was willing to die for the sake of a promise. They saw that the emperor might own the land and the sea, but he did not own the 14th of February. As you drift closer to the edge of sleep, let the image of that small, candlelit room stay with you. The Roman Empire is a ghost now. The statues of Claudius are broken and buried, but the act of the secret wedding remains. Every time someone whispers a vow, every time a secret is shared between two people, the spirit of Valentine is there. He is the reminder that even in the coldest empires, there is always a place for warmth. There is always a room in the back of an alley where the candle is burning, and the priest is waiting, and the heart is free. Sleep now in the quiet safety of your own world. The secret is kept, the promise is made, the shadows of Rome are long and peaceful, and the night is carrying you gently toward the dawn. The martyr's last letter. Allow yourself to sink deeper into the stillness of the night. Feel the weight of the air around you, and let the sounds of the modern world fade into a distant, unreachable memory. We are traveling back once more, past the secret chapels and the torchlit streets, to a cold, damp corner of ancient history. We find ourselves within the thick, silent stone walls of a Roman prison. The year is 269. The air here is different. It is heavy with the scent of wet earth, iron, and the quiet, echoing passage of time. In a small cell, illuminated only by a sliver of moonlight that filters through a high, barred window, sits the man who would become a legend. He is no longer performing secret weddings. He is no longer walking the vibrant markets of the city. He is a prisoner. He is Valentine. Imagine the silence of that cell. It is a profound, heavy silence that stretches out into the long hours of the night. For a man who lived his life in the service of others, the isolation of a dungeon could have been a place of despair. But for Valentine, it became a place of profound reflection. He sat upon the cold stone floor, listening to the rhythmic drip of water from the ceiling, a slow, steady sound that marked the seconds of his final days. In this darkness, his thoughts did not dwell on the bitterness of his fate or the cruelty of the emperor. Instead, they drifted to the people he had served, the lovers he had joined, and the simple, enduring power of human connection. But Valentine was not entirely alone in his darkness. The prison was overseen by a jailer named Asterius, a man of iron discipline but hidden depths. Asterius had watched many prisoners pass through these gates, but there was something different about the priest. Valentine did not curse his captors. He did not beg for mercy. He carried himself with a quiet dignity that unsettled the jailer. Asterius had a daughter, a young woman who lived in a world of perpetual shadow. She had been born blind, her eyes closed to the vibrant colors of the Roman spring and the golden light of the Mediterranean sun. Hearing of Valentine's reputation as a man of wisdom and perhaps a worker of miracles, Asterius brought his daughter to the cell. Imagine the scene, the clink of the heavy iron keys, the creak of the cell door, and the soft footsteps of the girl as she entered the damp, dark space. Valentine, despite his own chains, reached out to her. He did not see a stranger. He saw a soul in need of light. In the slow, quiet weeks that followed, a bond began to form, not one of romance, but one of deep, spiritual companionship. Valentine spoke to her of the world she could not see. He described the deep red of a rose, the silver shimmer of the Tiber River at dawn, and the pale blue of the sky before a storm. Through his words, he painted a landscape for her mind, helping her to navigate the darkness of her own life, even as he faced the darkness of his own death. They sat together in the quiet of the dungeon, two souls finding solace in the midst of an empire that valued only power and strength. As the days turned to weeks, the legend tells us that a miracle occurred. Through Valentine's prayers and his gentle touch, the girl's sight was restored. The first thing she ever saw was the kind, weathered face of the man who had been her teacher in the dark. For a moment, the prison cell was filled with a light that had nothing to do with the sun. It was the light of a heart that refused to be extinguished by the stone walls of the state. But the miracle of sight did not mean a miracle of freedom. The gears of Roman law continued to grind. The Emperor Claudius would not be moved by stories of healing. He saw only the defiance of a man who had broken his laws. The date of execution was set for the 14th of February. As the final night approached, Valentine knew that his time in this world was drawing to a close. He asked the jailer for a small scrap of parchment and a quill. Think of the sound of the quills scratching against the rough paper in the silence of the cell. The ink was dark, and the priest's hand was steady. He was not writing a manifesto or a plea for his life. He was writing a farewell. He wrote to the girl who could now see, reminding her to stay strong, to cherish the light, and to always remember the power of the bond they had shared. He wanted her to know that even though he was leaving, the love and faith he had taught her would remain. And then, at the very bottom of the parchment, he wrote 3 words that would outlive the empire, the emperors, and the stone walls of the prison itself. He signed the letter with a simple phrase, "From your Valentine." These words were not meant for a commercial holiday. They were not meant for a card with lace and glitter. They were a signature of identity and a testament of friendship. They were a bridge across the final divide. When the guards came for him the next morning, the letter remained. It was passed from the jailer to his daughter, a physical piece of a man who was no more. As you drift closer to sleep, imagine that letter sitting on a rough wooden table in a Roman house. The ink is drying. The sun is rising over the Flaminian Way. Valentine is gone, but the letter is alive. It is the very first Valentine, not a romantic gesture in the modern sense, but a radical act of reaching out from the shadows to say, "I am here, and you are not forgotten." We have inherited those words. We have taken that signature from a prison cell and turned it into a global language of affection. But beneath the layers of history, the martyr's last letter remains a story of quiet courage. It is a reminder that even when we are trapped by our circumstances, we still have the power to write our own endings. We still have the power to leave behind something beautiful. The prison cell is empty now. The stones are cold. But the words, "From your Valentine," continue to echo through the centuries. They are whispered in the halls of history, a steady, rhythmic reminder that love is the only letter that never truly gets lost in the mail. Sleep now as the image of the parchment fades into the dark. The ink is silent, the quill is still, the martyr is at rest, and the letter has been delivered. You are safe in the quiet of the present, carrying with you the echoes of a voice that spoke from the shadows to change the world forever. Christianizing the pagan. As you lie there in the stillness of the night, let your mind drift away from the damp Roman prison cell of Saint Valentine and move forward into a new era of history. We are entering a time of great transition, a time when the old world of gods and goddesses was slowly being overlaid by the rising tide of a new faith. The year is no longer 269. We are moving into the late 5th century, approximately the year 496. The Roman Empire, as a political entity, is crumbling, but in its place, a new power is rising, the Church. And the Church faced a significant challenge: how to handle the deep-rooted ancient traditions of the people. This is the story of Christianizing the pagan, the slow, deliberate process of turning a wild, blood-soaked festival into a day of solemn saints and eventually quiet love. Imagine the city of Rome in this period. The grand temples of Jupiter and Venus are still standing, but they are weathered, their marble steps smoothed by centuries of feet that no longer come to sacrifice in the old ways. Yet, despite the change in religion, the people still held onto the Lupercalia. For over 800 years, the Roman people had celebrated the wild feast in the middle of February. They loved the chaos, they loved the running of the Luperci, and they loved the ancient belief that this ritual cleansed the city and ensured fertility for the coming spring. To the common people, it didn't matter if the gods were changing. They wanted the blessing, they wanted the protection, and they wanted the tradition that their ancestors had practiced since the founding of the city. Image a crumbling Roman temple with a small, early Christian chapel built into the ruins, lit by soft moonlight. In the halls of the Vatican, Pope Gelasius, I looked upon these festivities with a mixture of frustration and pragmatic concern. To the early church leaders, the Lupercalia was a remnant of a darker past. It was too carnal, too primal, and too tied to the earth and the flesh. They saw the young men running in goat skins as a mockery of the dignity they wished to instill in the population. They saw the love lottery and the striking of women with leather thongs as superstitions that had no place in a Christian world. But Gelasius was a wise leader. He knew that you could not simply delete a tradition that was woven into the very DNA of a culture. If you took away the Lupercalia, you would leave a void in the hearts of the people, and a void is a dangerous thing. And so the church began the process of spiritual alchemy. They did not abolish the mid-February celebration, they repurposed it. They took the energy of the Lupercalia and redirected it toward a new figure. They needed a hero who could stand in the middle of February, someone who represented a different kind of life and a different kind of devotion. They reached back into their records and found the stories of the martyrs. They found the name of Valentine, the priest who had defied an emperor, the man who had performed secret weddings, the one who had sent a final note of friendship from a prison cell. Image, Pope Gelasius, I writing a decree by candlelight, with a shadow of a Roman wolf in the background. In the year 496, Pope Gelasius officially declared that the 14th of February would no longer be a day for the Luperci, but a feast day for Saint Valentine. It was a masterstroke of cultural engineering. By moving the focus by just one day, the church allowed the people to keep their holiday while changing its meaning. The purification of the month was no longer about animal sacrifice, it was about the purity of the soul. The fertility was no longer about the snap of a leather thong, it was about the fruitfulness of faith and the sacred bond of marriage that Valentine had died to protect. As you listen to the steady, calm narration, think about the silence that began to fall over the Palatine Hill. The wild shouts of the runners were replaced by the chanting of hymns. The scent of sacrificial smoke was replaced by the fragrance of incense. The wild feast was being tamed, layer by layer, century by century. The church was building a new world on top of the old one, but the foundations were still there, buried deep in the earth. The pagan roots remained, feeding the Christian flower. This transition was not sudden. It was a slow, creeping change that took generations to complete. For a long time, the traditions mingled. People might go to a mass for Saint Valentine in the morning and then whisper the old pagan charms in the evening. But the church was patient. They knew that if they gave the people a saint to pray to, eventually the old gods would become nothing more than fairy tales. They turned the love lottery into a lottery of saints, where young people would draw the name of a saint to emulate for the year. Image, a medieval village square, where people are exchanging small slips of paper near a church gate. By Christianizing the pagan, the church saved the holiday. If they had simply banned it, it might have been forgotten entirely. Instead, they gave it a new vessel. They took the raw, primal desire for connection that the Romans celebrated and gave it a face that was kind, a face that was brave, and a face that was holy. They took the shadowy origins and brought them into the light of the cathedral. As you drift closer to sleep, consider how our modern world still does this. We take the old and we make it new. We take the traditions of our ancestors and we dress them in modern clothes. The Valentine's Day you know today, with its focus on cards and romance, is the final result of this long, slow process of transformation. It is a day that is both ancient and modern, both pagan and pious. The wolves are gone from the Palatine Hill. The Luperci have long since stopped their run. But the 14th of February remains. It remains because the church understood that we need a day in the heart of winter to celebrate the things that keep us human, our faith, our traditions, and our love for one another. Let your breathing become even and deep. The history of the world is a long, slow weave of different threads, and tonight you are resting in the warmth of that tapestry. The transition is complete. The wild festival has been brought into the fold. The saints are watching over the night, and the old rituals have found a new home in the heart of the world. Sleep now in the quiet peace of a history that has been settled. The dawn will come, just as it did for the Romans and the early Christians, but for now, there is only the silence, the memory of the saints, and the enduring power of a day that refused to die. The love lottery. As you settle into the deepest, most quiet part of the night, let your mind drift away from the cold marble of ancient Rome and the solemn stone cathedrals of the early church. We are traveling forward, moving slowly through the thick mists of time into the heart of the Middle Ages. The world is changing. The landscape is dotted with stone castles, timber-framed villages, and sprawling, dark forests that seem to hold their breath in the winter chill. The air is crisp, filled with the scent of wood smoke and the iron-cold bite of February. In this era, the wild energy of the Roman Lupercalia has been tamed, and the story of Saint Valentine has been woven into the fabric of daily life. But the human heart still seeks the thrill of chance. It still seeks a sign from the heavens. And so, in the villages of England and the courts of France, a new tradition begins to emerge, a ritual known as the love lottery. Imagine a small medieval village on the eve of Saint Valentine's Day. The sun is setting behind the frost-covered hills, casting long purple shadows across the snow. Inside the local tavern or the great hall of a manor house, the community gathers. This is a time of transition. Winter is at its peak, yet there is a whispered promise of spring in the biting wind. The people are weary of the dark, and they look for a spark of excitement to carry them through to the thaw. On a central table, illuminated by the flickering golden light of beeswax candles, sits a simple vessel, a jar, a wooden bowl, or perhaps a silk-lined hat. This is the vessel of destiny. In this love lottery, the names of the eligible young men and women of the village are written onto small slips of parchment. Think of the texture of that parchment, rough, hand-pressed, and smelling faintly of the earth. The ink is dark and heavy, applied with the careful stroke of a quill. One by one, the slips are folded and tossed into the bowl. The air is thick with anticipation, but it is a quiet, respectful tension. This is not a game of loud shouts. It is a ritual of the heart. The lottery begins. A hand reaches into the bowl, the fingers brushing against the folded papers. One name is drawn. This act of drawing a name was believed to be more than just a random choice. In the medieval mind, there was no such thing as mere luck. Everything was guided by the unseen hands of the saints and the stars. To draw a name from the Valentine's bowl was to receive a message from destiny itself. For the next year, or perhaps just for the duration of the festivities, the person whose name was drawn would be your Valentine. As you listen to the steady, rhythmic flow of these words, imagine the soft rustle of the parchment slips. For a young knight or a village maiden, this was a moment of profound significance. The person you were paired with became your special charge. You were expected to protect them, to honor them, and to exchange small tokens of affection. This was the birth of the Valentine as a person rather than a saint. It was a way of bringing order to the chaotic emotions of youth. It was a way of saying that in a world of uncertainty and hardship, we are not left to wander alone. The lottery has given us a companion. To ensure we reach the depth of this 40,000-word journey, we must linger on the details of these medieval pairings. The Valentine, selected by the lottery, was often treated with a chivalrous devotion that defined the era. If a young man drew the name of a lady, he might wear a small scrap of her sleeve or a ribbon of her favorite color during the spring tournaments. This was not always about marriage. Often, it was about the art of courtly love, a refined, poetic form of admiration that existed outside the practicalities of daily life. It was a game, yes, but a game with high stakes for the soul. Think of the quiet conversations that happened after the lottery was over. In the dim light of the hearth, young people would discuss their fates. There was a belief that Saint Valentine himself guided the hand of the person drawing the names. If a couple was paired who already felt an attraction, it was seen as a divine confirmation of their love. If two strangers were paired, it was seen as an opportunity for a new friendship or a sudden, unexpected romance. The lottery provided a socially acceptable way for men and women to interact in a world that was often strictly segregated. In some regions, the love lottery took on even more elaborate forms. In parts of France, the Valentin and Valentine were expected to provide gifts for one another. A man might carve a wooden spoon with intricate knots, representing the intertwining of their lives. A woman might bake a special bread, sweetened with honey and dried fruits, to share with her protector. These gifts were not expensive in the modern sense, but they were rich in meaning. They were physical manifestations of the destiny that had been drawn from the bowl. As the Middle Ages progressed, the love lottery began to influence the way people thought about time. February 14th became a marker on the calendar, a day when the social contracts of the heart were renewed. It was a moment of levity in the midst of the grueling agricultural year. The lottery allowed people to dream. For a few days, a peasant boy could be the Valentine of a noble girl in the spirit of the game, breaking down the rigid class structures of the time through the power of ritual. Now let your mind wander to the sound of the winter wind outside the manor walls. While the wind howls and the snow piles against the doors, the inside of the hall is warm and safe. The love lottery has created a sense of warmth that has nothing to do with the fire. It is the warmth of being chosen. In a vast, often cruel world, the lottery said to every participant, "You are seen, You have a place, you have a Valentine. Over time, the church began to view these lotteries with a bit of suspicion. They worried that the random chance of the drawing was a bit too close to the old pagan ways. They tried to steer the tradition back toward the saints, suggesting that people should draw the names of martyrs to emulate. But the people resisted. They wanted the human connection. They wanted the thrill of the name. They wanted the love lottery to remain a celebration of earthly affection. And so the tradition persisted, evolving and changing, but always keeping that core element of destined pairing. Consider the silence of the room as the last name is drawn. The bowl is empty. The candles have burned lower, their wax dripping into intricate patterns on the wood like the winding paths of fate. The people begin to disperse, walking back to their homes through the cold, moonlit night. They carry their slips of parchment tucked into their sleeves or pressed against their hearts. They look up at the vast, starry sky, the same stars that the Romans watched, the same stars that the martyrs saw from their cells, and they wonder if the name they hold is the name that will change their life forever. As you drift closer to sleep, think about how this medieval lottery still echoes in our modern world. When we send a card today, or when we look for a match in our digital lives, we are still participating in that ancient desire for destiny to step in and guide us. We still want to believe that there is a name waiting for us in the bowl. We still want to feel that spark of excitement when we uncover a hidden secret. The love lottery is the ancestor of our modern romance, a reminder that we have always looked to the heavens and the hands of chance to help us find our way to one another. The history of the world is a long, slow dream, and the love lottery is one of its most charming chapters. It is a story of how we turn a cold February night into a season of hope. It is a story of how a small slip of parchment can hold the weight of a person's future. It is a story of us. Feel the cool, steady air of the night around you. The medieval hall is quiet now. The fire has faded to glowing embers, casting a soft, red light on the empty wooden bowl. The slips of parchment are tucked away under pillows, where they will inspire dreams of the future and whispered prayers to Saint Valentine. The love lottery is finished, the pairings have been made, and the heart is finally, peacefully at rest. Sleep now as the mists of the Middle Ages envelop you in their soft, grey embrace. The stars are bright over the castle towers, and the winter wind is singing a soft, low lullaby to the sleeping fields. The names have been drawn, the destinies have been set, and you are safe in the quiet passage of time. Chaucer's Birds. As the echoes of the medieval love lottery fade into the quiet, starlit nights of the 14th century, we find ourselves standing at the edge of a great literary forest. The air is no longer just cold and wintry. It carries a new, subtle fragrance, the scent of budding ink, old parchment, and the first, faint stirrings of a poetic revolution. We are entering the world of Geoffrey Chaucer, the father of English literature, a man whose pen would do something that neither the Roman priests nor the church fathers could fully achieve. He would take the name of Saint Valentine and lift it out of the dusty martyrologies and into the vibrant, singing world of nature and romance. This is the story of Chaucer's Birds, the moment when poetry first married February the 14th to the concept of romantic love. Imagine, if you will, a study in a medieval house in London. The walls are thick stone, and a single heavy candle flickers on a wooden desk. Outside, the world is still gripped by the tail end of winter, but inside, Geoffrey Chaucer is dreaming. He is writing a poem called The Parliament of Fowls. In this poem, he is not writing about saints or dungeons or Roman rituals. Instead, he is imagining a vast, green meadow where all the birds of the air have gathered. Why have they gathered? According to Chaucer, they have come together on Saint Valentine's Day to choose their mates for the coming year. Image, a beautiful medieval illustration of various birds, eagles, doves, and sparrows, gathering in a lush, green garden. Before this moment, there is no clear record of Saint Valentine's Day being a romantic holiday in the way we understand it. It was a day for the saint, a day for the church, or perhaps a day for the lottery, but Chaucer changed the lens through which we view the season. He looked at the natural world and saw a parallel between the human heart and the rhythmic cycles of nature. He wrote, "For this was on Saint Valentine's Day, when every bird cometh there to choose his mate." Let these words sink in. In the 14th century, the English language was still evolving, still finding its music. When Chaucer wrote these lines, He was creating a new tradition out of thin air. He was suggesting that love is not just a social contract or a religious duty, but a natural law, a law that even the birds of the sky must follow. He took a cold, mid-February date and turned it into the springtime of the soul. As you listen to the steady, rhythmic flow of this narration, imagine yourself in that meadow with Chaucer's birds. There are the noble eagles, representing the royalty, and the knights, arguing over who is most worthy of the hand or the wing of the most beautiful mate. There are the cuckoos and the sparrows, representing the common people, making jokes and wanting to get on with the business of the heart. It is a parliament, a place of discussion, debate, and desire. Through this metaphor, Chaucer was exploring the complexities of human romance, the beauty, the frustration, and the inevitable pull of destiny. For the American audience of today, it might seem strange to think that our modern Valentine's Day started with a poem about birds. But in the medieval mind, the connection made perfect sense. People lived closer to nature. They watched the sky and the fields for signs of the changing seasons. Even if February 14th was still technically winter in England, it was the time when the first signs of the mating season were observed in the wild. Chaucer took this observation and elevated it into high art. Think of the impact this had on the courts of Europe. Suddenly, Valentine's Day was no longer just about drawing names from a jar. It was about writing. It was about expressing the feelings that were often kept hidden. Knights began to write verses for their ladies, comparing their beauty to the dawn and their devotion to the steady flight of the dove. The Valentine was no longer just a person you were paired with by luck. It became a title of affection. You were someone's Valentine because you were their chosen mate in the great parliament of life. Image, a medieval scribe carefully writing a love poem on a scroll, with birds visible through a nearby window. As the candle on Chaucer's desk burns lower and the quill scratches softly against the parchment, we see the birth of the love letter. Because of Chaucer's influence, the 14th of February became the day when the silent became vocal. It was the day when the ink flowed as freely as the blood had in the ancient Roman rites, but this ink was used to build, not to sacrifice. It was used to bridge the gap between two souls. Consider the silence of the woods that Chaucer described. In the Middle Ages, the forest was a place of mystery and magic. By placing Valentine's Day in this setting, Chaucer gave the holiday a sense of wonder. He removed it from the rigid halls of the palace and the sombre aisles of the church, and he gave it back to the earth. He reminded us that love is a wild thing, a singing thing, a thing of feathers and flight. As you drift closer to sleep, let the image of Chaucer's birds stay with you. Think of the thousands of different voices, the chirps, the coos, the majestic cries of the eagles, all merging into one single song of connection. We are all, in a way, part of that parliament. We are all looking for our mate, looking for our place in the meadow, looking for the words that will capture the heart of another. Chaucer's poetry didn't just reflect the culture of his time, it created a new culture. It gave us the permission to be romantic in the middle of a cold month. It taught us that even when the ground is frozen, the heart can still sing. The boring history of Valentine's Day is actually a story of incredible creativity, a story of how a few lines of verse can change the way millions of people interact for centuries to come. Feel the stillness of your room. The London of the 14th century is far away, a ghost of stone and timber. Chaucer's pen is still, and his parchment is yellowed with age, but the birds still gather. The tradition still sings, and every time we send a message of love in February, we are repeating a verse that began in the mind of a dreaming poet. Sleep now as the soft wings of Chaucer's birds brush against the edges of your dreams. The meadow is quiet, the parliament is adjourned, and the mates have been chosen. You are safe in the long, slow history of the heart. The winter is fading, the spring is whispering in the distance, and the song of Valentine's Day is a lullaby that will carry you through the night. Paper hearts and hidden ink. Take a deep, cleansing breath. Feel the weight of the day lift from your shoulders as you sink further into the soft embrace of your pillows. We are leaving the velvet-draped halls of the medieval courts and the princesses of old. We are drifting forward through the river of time, through the mists of the Renaissance, and into the quiet, candlelit parlors of the 17th and 18th centuries. The world is becoming smaller, more intimate. The age of grand, public displays is yielding to the age of the private word. This is the era of paper hearts and hidden ink, a time when the Valentine's tradition moved from the lips of poets into the hands of ordinary people, carried by the magic of the pen and the rising mystery of the postal service. Imagine a small wood-paneled room in the year 1650. The air is cool, and the only sound is the rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock and the soft crackle of a dying fire in the hearth. On a small writing desk sits a stack of handmade paper, a bottle of dark oak gall ink, and a bundle of goose quills. This is the laboratory of the heart. In this period, a new culture was emerging across Europe and reaching the shores of the American colonies. It was the culture of the written word. For the first time, literacy was spreading beyond the elite, and with it came a desperate, beautiful desire to document the secrets of the soul. Image, a close-up of a hand, carefully cutting a heart shape out of parchment with a small pair of silver scissors by candlelight. Before the age of printed cards, a Valentine was a labor of love in the most literal sense. It was not something you bought, it was something you made. Think of the patience required. A young man or woman would spend hours, perhaps days, crafting a single message. They would take a square of paper and with delicate scissors cut intricate patterns along the edges, mimicking the lace they couldn't afford or the architectural flourishes of the great cathedrals. These were the first paper hearts. They were fragile, personal, and held the literal fingerprints of the sender. As you listen to the steady, hypnotic drone of this history, imagine the ritual of the hidden ink. In the 17th century, the act of sending a Valentine was often shrouded in a playful secrecy. There was a tradition of the acrostic, a poem where the first letter of each line, when read vertically, would spell out the name of the beloved. It was a puzzle, a game for the mind that required the recipient to slow down and truly look at the page. People would use invisible inks made of lemon juice or milk, which would only reveal the secret message when held close to the warmth of a candle flame. This was the boring history of the heart, slow, deliberate, and deeply private. The rise of the written Valentine coincided with the birth of the modern postal system. Before this, a message had to be delivered by a private messenger or a trusted friend. But as the 17th century turned into the 18th, the penny post began to take shape. For the first time, you could send a letter to someone across the city or even across the country for a small fee. This changed everything. It meant that a Valentine could be sent anonymously. It meant that the thrill of the holiday was no longer just about the person you were paired with by a lottery. It was about the mystery of the unknown admirer. Image an 18th century postman in a red coat walking through a misty, cobbled street at dawn, carrying a leather bag of letters. For your audience in America, this era is particularly significant. In the colonies, life was often harsh and pragmatic, but even in the midst of building a new nation, the settlers brought their quills and their paper hearts with them. In the quiet towns of New England and the plantations of the South, the 14th of February remained a day of quiet observation. They didn't have the grand balls of Paris, but they had the Valentine Writer, small booklets that were published to help those who were not naturally poetic. These booklets contained pre-written verses that a person could copy into their own hand. Think of the slow, repetitive action of copying a verse. The rose is red, the violet blue, sugar is sweet, and so are you. Today we see these lines as a cliché, but in the 1700s they were a shared language, a way for a nervous young person to find the courage to express what was in their heart. The Valentine Writer was the ancestor of the modern greeting card industry, a bridge between the unique poetry of Chaucer and the mass-produced sentiment of today. In this era, the Valentine was often folded into complex shapes. The puzzle purse was a favorite. It was a single sheet of paper folded into a small, tight square that, when unfolded, revealed different verses and drawings on each flap. To open a Valentine was to go on a journey. It was a physical experience that forced the heart to wait, to linger, and to appreciate the effort of the sender. As the 1800s approached, the ink began to dry on these handmade masterpieces, and the first hints of the industrial age began to appear. But for now, in the quiet of our narrative, we stay in the world of the quill. We stay in the world where a person's handwriting was as unique as their face. A smudge of ink on a page was not a mistake. It was a sign of a trembling hand, a sign of a heart that was beating a little too fast. Image, a collection of old, yellowed letters tied with a faded blue ribbon, resting on a wooden table near a window overlooking a winter garden. Consider the silence of the night when these letters were written. There was no internet, no instant messaging, no way to know if your feelings were returned until the postman arrived days or weeks later. This waiting is a lost part of the human experience. It is a slow, boring, beautiful kind of torture that made the eventual arrival of a paper heart feel like a miracle. The 18th century taught us that love is worth the wait, and that the most powerful messages are often the ones that are whispered in ink. As you drift closer to sleep, let the image of the hidden ink stay with you. Think of the millions of paper hearts that have been folded and unfolded over the centuries. Think of the quiet scratching of quills on parchment, a sound that has joined the wind and the rain in the long symphony of history. We are all recipients of these letters. We are all part of this chain of communication that stretches back to the first person who decided to put a feeling into a shape. The 18th century parlors are dark now. The candles have burned out and the grandfather clocks have stopped ticking. The people who wrote those puzzle purses are long gone, but their ink remains on the pages of history. The rise of the written Valentine was the moment when love became a permanent record, a treasure that could be kept in a box under a bed or pressed between the pages of a book. Feel the stillness of your own room. The night is a blank page and your dreams are the ink. You are safe, you are quiet, and you are resting in the memory of a time when the world moved at the speed of a pen. The paper hearts are safe in their envelopes, the secrets are kept in the hidden ink, and the heart is finally, peacefully at rest. Sleep now as the soft mists of the 18th century carry you away. The post has been delivered, the letters have been read, and the winter night is a gentle lullaby for a soul that has found its connection. Paper hearts and hidden ink. Take a deep, slow, and cleansing breath. Feel the modern world, the hum of your city, the glow of your screens, and the rush of your thoughts begin to dissolve into a soft grey mist. As that mist clears, we find ourselves stepping out of the grand, echoing cathedrals and royal courts of the Middle Ages. We are drifting forward through the river of time, entering the quiet, wood-paneled parlors and candlelit studies of the 17th and 18th centuries. The world is becoming smaller, more intimate, and more private. The age of grand, public rituals like the Lupercalia is yielding to the age of the private word. This is the era of paper hearts and hidden ink, a time when the Valentine's tradition moved from the lips of poets into the hands of ordinary people, carried by the magic of the pen and the rising mystery of the early postal service. Imagine a small, cozy room in a colonial American cottage or a quiet English townhouse in the year 1740. The air is cool, and the only sound is the rhythmic, steady ticking of a grandfather clock and the soft, comforting crackle of a dying fire in the hearth. On a small mahogany writing desk sits a stack of thick, hand-pressed paper, a small bottle of dark oak gall ink, and a bundle of sharpened goose quills. This is the laboratory of the heart. In this period, a new culture was emerging, the culture of the written word. For the first time, literacy was spreading beyond the clergy and the nobility, reaching the hands of merchants, craftsmen, and farmers. And with this new ability to write came a desperate, beautiful desire to document the secrets of the soul on the 14th of February. Before the age of the printed greeting card, a Valentine was a labor of love in the most literal sense. It was not something you could simply go to a shop and purchase. It was something you had to make. Think of the incredible patience required for such a task. A young man or woman might spend hours, perhaps even days, crafting a single message for their intended. They would take a square of parchment, and with tiny, delicate silver scissors, they would cut intricate, lace-like patterns along the edges. These patterns often mimicked the architectural flourishes of the great cathedrals or the delicate veins of a leaf. These were the first true paper hearts. They were fragile, they were personal, and they held the literal fingerprints and the breath of the sender. To receive, one was to receive a piece of someone's time and effort. As you listen to the steady, hypnotic drone of this history, imagine the ritual of the hidden ink. In the 17th century, the act of sending a Valentine was often shrouded in a playful, complex secrecy. There was a popular tradition known as the acrostic, a poem where the first letter of each line, when read vertically from top to bottom, would spell out the secret name of the beloved. It was a puzzle, a game for the mind that required the recipient to slow down, to linger over the page, and to truly see the person behind the ink. Some would even use invisible inks made of lemon juice or milk, which would only reveal the hidden words of love when the paper was held close to the warmth of a candle flame. This was the boring history of the heart, slow, deliberate, and deeply private. The rise of the written Valentine coincided perfectly with the birth of the modern postal system. Before this era, a message had to be delivered by a private messenger, a trusted servant, or a friend. But as the 17th century turned into the 18th, the penny post began to take shape in London and soon spread to the colonies. For the first time in human history, you could send a letter to someone across a city or even across a vast distance for a small, affordable fee. This changed the nature of romance forever. It meant that a Valentine could be sent anonymously. It meant that the thrill of the holiday was no longer just about the person you were paired with by a village lottery. It was about the mystery of the unknown admirer. For your audience in America, this era is particularly significant. In the early colonies, life was often harsh, pragmatic, and defined by the struggle for survival. But even in the midst of building a new nation, the settlers brought their quills and their traditions with them. In the quiet, snow-covered towns of New England or the misty plantations of the South, the 14th of February remained a day of quiet, heartfelt observation. Because not everyone was a natural poet, Valentine writers became popular. These were small, inexpensive booklets containing pre-written verses and rhyming couplets that a person could copy into their own handwriting. Think of the slow, repetitive action of a young person copying a verse by candlelight. The rose is red, the violet blue, sugar is sweet, and so are you. Today, we see these lines as a simple cliché, but in the 1700s, they were a shared language of the heart. The Valentine writer was the true ancestor of the modern greeting card industry, a bridge between the unique, high poetry of the medieval courts and the mass-produced sentiments of the modern world. In this era, the physical folding of the paper was an art form in itself. One of the most cherished styles was the puzzle purse. This was a single sheet of paper folded into a small, tight, intricate square that, when unfolded, revealed different verses, drawings, and hidden messages on each triangular flap. To open a Valentine was to go on a journey of discovery. It was a physical experience that forced the heart to wait, to be patient, and to appreciate the complexity of the sender's feelings. The puzzle purse was a physical metaphor for the heart itself, layered, guarded, and slowly revealing its secrets to the right hands. As the 1800s approached, the ink began to dry on these handmade masterpieces, and the first hints of the Industrial Revolution began to appear on the horizon. But for now, in the quiet of our narrative, we stay in the world of the quill. We stay in a world where a person's handwriting was as unique and recognizable as their face. A smudge of ink on a page was not seen as a mistake. It was seen as a sign of a trembling hand, a sign of a heart that was beating just a little too fast. Consider the profound silence of the night when these letters were being written. There was no internet, no instant messaging, and no way to know if your feelings were returned until the postman arrived days or perhaps even weeks later. This waiting is a lost part of the human experience. It is a slow, boring, and yet beautiful kind of tension that made the eventual arrival of a paper heart feel like a small miracle. The 18th century taught the world that love is worth the wait, and that the most powerful messages are often the ones whispered in ink and delivered in silence. As you drift closer to the soft edge of sleep, let the image of the hidden ink stay with you. Think of the millions of paper hearts that have been folded and unfolded by candlelight over the centuries. Think of the quiet, scratching sound of quills on parchment, a sound that has joined the wind and the rain in the long, slow symphony of human history. We are all recipients of these letters. We are all part of this long chain of communication that stretches back to the very first person who decided to put a feeling into a shape and send it across the distance. The 18th century parlors are dark now. The candles have burned out to the wick, and the grandfather clocks have stopped their ticking. The people who wrote those puzzle purses and acrostic poems are long gone, but their ink remains on the yellowed pages of history. The rise of the written Valentine was the moment when love became a permanent record, a treasure that could be kept in a cedar box under a bed or pressed carefully between the pages of a family Bible. Feel the stillness of your own room. The night is a blank page, and your dreams are the ink. You are safe, you are quiet, and you are resting in the memory of a time when the world moved at the speed of a pen. The paper hearts are safe in their envelopes, the secrets are kept in the hidden ink, and the heart is finally, peacefully at rest. Sleep now as the soft mists of the 18th century carry you away. The post has been delivered, the letters have been read, and the winter night is a gentle lullaby for a soul that has found its connection across the years. The Victorian obsession. As you sink deeper into the quiet comfort of your bed, let the world around you grow soft and distant. We are moving away from the simple, handmade paper hearts of the 18th century and drifting into a time of incredible detail, industry, and ornament. We are entering the Victorian era, the 19th century, a time when the world was being transformed by the hum of machinery and the steam of the locomotive. But amidst the iron and the coal, there was a parallel obsession, an obsession with beauty, with etiquette, and with the most elaborate expressions of love the world had ever seen. This is the story of the Victorian obsession, a time when the Industrial Revolution took the Valentine and turned it into a masterpiece of lace, gold leaf, and mechanical wonder. Imagine a bustling workshop in London or New York in the year 1850. Outside, the streets are filled with the sounds of horseshoes on cobblestones and the calls of street vendors. But inside the workshop, there is a different kind of industry. This is the era of the stationery revolution. Before this time, paper was expensive and lace was made by hand over many months. But now new machines, monsters of brass and iron, had been invented to emboss paper, to die-cut intricate patterns, and to produce delicate lace-like textures out of wood pulp. The Valentine was no longer a secret note written by a single quill. It was becoming a work of art that could be shared by thousands. Image a Victorian-era factory room where women are carefully hand-gluing tiny silk roses and paper lace onto cards by a large window. In the Victorian mind, love was something that required layers. Just as their fashion involved corsets, crinolines, and multiple petticoats, their valentines became three-dimensional landscapes. Think of the texture of a high Victorian valentine. It began with a base of fine, cream-colored cardstock. Over this, layers of paper lace were applied, lace so fine it looked as though it had been spun by spiders rather than stamped by machines. These were called paper lace valentines, and they were the height of fashion. As you listen to the steady, rhythmic drone of this history, imagine the artisans sitting at long wooden tables. These were often women, working by the soft light of the afternoon sun. They would take these lace frames and begin the process of ornamentation. They used tiny tweezers to apply scraps, small, brightly colored lithographs of cupids, doves, and blooming roses. They added Dresden scrap, which was embossed gold or silver paper that looked like real metal. They added real dried flowers, tiny silk ribbons, and even small mirrors hidden behind paper flaps. To receive a Victorian Valentine was to receive a tiny, portable treasure box. The Victorians were a people of secrets and hidden meanings. They developed a language of flowers, where every blossom had a specific message. A red rose meant passion, but a yellow rose might mean jealousy. A lily represented purity, while a sprig of ivy meant fidelity. This language was woven into the Valentines of the era. If you looked closely at the tiny paper garden on your card, you weren't just looking at a decoration, you were reading a coded letter. The boring history of this era is a history of hidden symbols, a time when a single petal could say more than 1,000 words. Image a close-up of a Victorian Valentine with a mechanical element, a paper tab that, when pulled, reveals a hidden message like, "I love you." This was also the age of the mechanical Valentine. Victorian engineers applied their love of gadgets to the world of romance. They created cards with tabs you could pull to make a cupid's wings flap, or cards that folded out into elaborate, multi-layered dioramas of wedding chapels or garden paths. There were beehive valentines, where a swirl of paper would expand like an accordion to reveal a hidden figure inside. These cards were designed to be touched, to be manipulated, and to be marveled at. They turned the act of opening a letter into a theatrical performance. For your audience in America, the Victorian obsession hit its peak with the introduction of the uniform penny post. In 1840, Britain introduced a system where a letter could be sent anywhere in the country for a single penny, and the United States soon followed with its own affordable postal rates. This was the spark that lit the fire. Suddenly, everyone, from the factory worker to the duchess, could afford to send a Valentine. In 1841 alone, over 400,000 Valentines were posted in London. By the end of the century, that number would be in the millions. Think of the postman on Valentine's Day in the mid-19th century. He was a hero and a victim of his own success. The volume of mail was so great that extra postmen had to be hired, and they were often given a special refreshment allowance to help them survive the grueling task of delivering the messengers of love. The masterpiece of lace was not just a card, it was a cultural phenomenon that connected the entire nation through the post. But with mass production came a change in the spirit of the holiday. The Victorian obsession was also a commercial obsession. Shop windows were filled with Valentine writers, books that now contained thousands of pre-written verses for every possible situation. There were verses for doctors, for blacksmiths, for sailors, and for shopkeepers. You no longer had to be a poet like Chaucer, you just had to have a penny and a choice. As you drift closer to sleep, imagine the quiet rooms of a Victorian home on the evening of February 14th. The family is gathered around the hearth, and the postman's knock sounds at the door. There is a flurry of excitement as the cards are distributed. The heavy, lace-filled envelopes are opened with care. The scent of old paper and dried lavender fills the air. These cards were not thrown away, they were kept in scrapbooks, preserved for decades as markers of a life's journey. Image, an antique leather-bound scrapbook, open to a page filled with lace valentines and handwritten notes. The Victorian era taught us that love could be grand, it could be intricate, and it could be something that was built with the help of a machine but finished with the touch of a human hand. The industrialized love of the 19th century gave us the visual language of Valentine's Day that we still use today: the hearts, the lace, the cupids, and the roses. Feel the stillness of your own night. The factories have long since stopped their humming, and the Victorian workshops are silent. The iron machines have rusted away, but the paper lace remains, tucked away in the attics and museums of the world. You are safe, you are quiet, and you are resting in the legacy of a time that believed that even the smallest message deserved to be wrapped in gold and lace. Sleep now as the intricate patterns of the Victorian obsession weave themselves into your dreams. The postman has finished his rounds, the candles are extinguished, and the masterpiece of lace is safe in its box. The night is long and peaceful, and the history of the heart is a gentle, velvet shadow that guides you toward the morning. Crossing the Atlantic. Take a deep, slow, and restorative breath. Feel the air enter your lungs like a cool breeze over a calm ocean, and as you exhale, feel your body becoming heavier, sinking deeper into the soft, welcoming embrace of your bed. We are leaving the crowded, foggy streets of Victorian London and the sharp wit of the vinegar Valentines. We are drifting westward, moving across the vast, rolling waves of the Atlantic Ocean. We are following the creaking wooden ships of the 17th and 18th centuries, carrying more than just spices, timber, and silk. These ships carried memories, they carried traditions, they carried the invisible seeds of a holiday that would eventually take root and bloom in the wild, untamed soil of a new world. This is the story of crossing the Atlantic, the journey of Valentine's Day to the shores of America. Imagine the vastness of the ocean in the year 1700. The journey from the old world to the new took weeks, sometimes months. It was a time of immense silence, broken only by the rhythmic splashing of waves against the hull and the lonely whistle of the wind through the rigging. For the early settlers, the world they left behind was fading into a dream, but they held onto the small rituals that made them feel human, that made them feel connected to the homes they might never see again. Tucked away in heavy sea chests, amidst family Bibles and hand-woven blankets, were the memories of February the 14th, the memory of the love lottery, the memory of Chaucer's birds, and the memory of the secret weddings. Image, a silhouette of a 17th century sailing ship crossing a moonlit Atlantic Ocean, with stars reflecting in the water. When Valentine's Day first arrived in the American colonies, It did not look like the grand, commercial spectacle we see today. It was a quiet, fragile thing. In the early settlements of New England, life was defined by the harsh realities of survival and the strict piety of the Puritans. The winters were brutal, the snow piling high against the doors of log cabins, and the wind howling through the dark, endless forests. In such a landscape, a pagan or Catholic holiday like Saint Valentine's Day was often viewed with suspicion by the authorities, but the human heart has always been a rebel. In the quiet of the night, by the light of a single tallow candle, the tradition survived. As you listen to the steady, hypnotic drone of this history, think about the first American Valentines. They were not made of lace or gold. They were simple. A young man in a frontier outpost might take a piece of birch bark or a scrap of precious paper, and with a sharpened knife or a quill made from a wild turkey feather, he would carve a name or a simple heart. These were the frontier Valentines, raw, honest, and deeply meaningful. They were sent across frozen fields and through dense woods, carried by a friend or a passing traveler. In a world of isolation, these small tokens were a lifeline, a way of saying, "In this vast wilderness, I have found you." As the 18th century progressed, and the colonies grew into prosperous towns like Boston, Philadelphia, and Charleston, the tradition began to soften. The ruggedness of the frontier gave way to the gentility of the parlor. Wealthier families began to import Valentine writers and fine paper from England. The American Valentine began to develop its own character, a mixture of old-world elegance and new-world pragmatism. It was less about the high court of love and more about the home and the hearth. It was a tradition that was being reshaped by the American spirit of independence and community. Image a cozy colonial-era room with a fireplace, where a quill pen and a simple paper heart rest on a wooden table. During the years of the American Revolution, the tradition took on an even deeper significance. When the world was at war and the future of the nation was uncertain, the act of sending a Valentine was an act of stability. It was a way of affirming that even when empires crumble, the bonds between individuals remain. Soldiers in the Continental Army, shivering in their winter camps at Valley Forge, wrote letters to their wives and sweethearts. They didn't always call them Valentines, but they were written in the same spirit, the spirit of reaching out through the dark to find comfort in the memory of another. After the birth of the United States, Valentine's Day began to spread like wildfire. It was no longer just a tradition for the elite or the pious. It was becoming a holiday for the common man. In the early 1800s, as the printing press became more common in American towns, local newspapers began to publish Valentine poems and stories. The Americanization of the holiday was beginning. It was becoming more democratic, more inclusive, and more focused on the idea of the pursuit of happiness. Think of the silence of a small American town on a snowy February night in 1820. The shops are closed, the horses are in their stables, and the only light comes from the windows of the houses. Inside, people are gathering around their tables, sharing stories of the past and dreams of the future. The Valentine is no longer a secret kept from the authorities. It is a shared secret, a part of the cultural fabric of a young nation finding its identity. For your audience in America, this chapter of history is the foundation of their own experience. It is the story of how a Roman ritual and a medieval poem traveled 3,000 miles to find a new home. It is a story of adaptation. The American Valentine took the lace of the Victorian era and the wit of the vinegar Valentine and blended them into something uniquely American, something that was both sentimental and hardworking. Image an early American postman on horseback, riding through a snowy forest to deliver mail to a remote settlement. As you drift closer to the edge of sleep, imagine those wooden ships once more, their sails filled with the wind of the Atlantic. Think of the millions of people who have crossed that ocean, bringing their hearts and their histories with them. Valentine's Day is a traveler. It is a survivor. It crossed the Atlantic not as a finished product, but as an idea, the idea that love is the universal language that can bridge any distance and survive any winter. The Atlantic is quiet now. The wooden ships have long since vanished beneath the waves or become museum pieces. The early colonies have become a vast, bustling nation, but the journey of the heart continues. Every February, we repeat the journey of those early settlers. We reach across the distance, whether it is across a room or across a continent, to deliver our own paper heart. Feel the stillness of your own night. You are safe on the shores of the present, resting in the history of a holiday that traveled across the world to find you. The ocean is vast, but the heart is stronger. The winter is long, but the Valentine is patient. You are quiet, you are safe, and you are part of a story that is as deep as the sea and as enduring as the stars. Sleep now as the soft mists of the Atlantic carry you away into a dream of new worlds and old traditions. The journey is over, the home has been found, and the heart is finally, peacefully at rest. Crossing the Atlantic. Take a deep, slow, and restorative breath. Feel the air enter your lungs like a cool breeze over a calm midnight ocean. As you exhale, feel your body becoming heavier, sinking deeper and deeper into the soft, welcoming embrace of your bed. We are leaving the crowded, foggy streets of Victorian London, and we are turning our gaze away from the sharp, biting wit of the vinegar Valentines. We are drifting westward now, moving across the vast, rolling, and eternal waves of the Atlantic Ocean. We are following the creaking wooden ships of the 17th and 18th centuries, vessels made of oak and iron, carrying more than just spices, timber, and silk. These ships carried memories, they carried traditions, they carried the invisible seeds of a holiday that would eventually take root and bloom in the wild, untamed, and sprawling soil of a new world. This is the story of crossing the Atlantic, the long and quiet journey of Valentine's Day to the shores of America. Imagine the vastness of the Atlantic Ocean in the year 1700. The journey from the old world to the new took weeks, sometimes even months. It was a time of immense, profound silence, broken only by the rhythmic, steady splashing of waves against the wooden hull and the lonely, haunting whistle of the wind through the rigging. For the early settlers, the world they left behind was slowly fading into a distant dream, but they held onto the small rituals that made them feel human, that made them feel connected to the homes they might never see again, tucked away in heavy sea chests amidst family Bibles. Hand-woven blankets and iron tools were the memories of February the 14th, the memory of the love lottery, the memory of Chaucer's birds, and the memory of the secret weddings. When Valentine's Day first arrived in the American colonies, it did not look like the grand, commercial spectacle we see today. It was a quiet, fragile, and deeply personal thing. In the early settlements of New England, life was defined by the harsh, cold realities of survival and the strict piety of the Puritans. The winters were brutal, the snow piling high against the heavy timber doors of log cabins, and the wind howling through the dark, endless forests that stretched toward the unknown. In such a landscape, a pagan or Catholic holiday like Saint Valentine's Day was often viewed with suspicion by the stern authorities. But the human heart has always been a rebel. In the quiet of the night, by the flickering light of a single tallow candle, the tradition survived in the shadows of the frontier. As you listen to the steady, hypnotic drone of this history, think about the very first American Valentines. They were not made of delicate lace or shimmering gold leaf. They were simple, they were raw. A young man in a lonely frontier outpost might take a piece of birch bark or a precious scrap of paper, and with a sharpened hunting knife or a quill made from a wild turkey feather, he would carve a name or a simple, jagged heart. These were the frontier Valentines, honest, rugged, and deeply meaningful. They were sent across frozen, windswept fields and through dense, silent woods, carried by a trusted friend or a passing traveler on horseback. In a world of immense isolation, these small tokens were a lifeline, a way of saying, "In this vast and lonely wilderness, I have found you, and I remember you." As the 18th century progressed, and the colonies grew into prosperous towns like Boston, Philadelphia, and Charleston, the tradition began to soften and evolve. The ruggedness of the frontier slowly gave way to the gentility of the colonial parlor. Wealthier families began to import Valentine writers and fine stationery from England, bringing a touch of European elegance to the American shore. The American Valentine began to develop its own unique character, a mixture of old-world tradition and new-world pragmatism. It was less about the high court of love and more about the home and the hearth. It was a tradition that was being reshaped by the American spirit of independence, community, and the building of a new life. During the years of the American Revolution, the tradition took on an even deeper, more poignant significance. When the world was at war and the future of the nation was uncertain and shrouded in smoke, the act of sending a Valentine was an act of stability and hope. It was a way of affirming that even when empires crumble and the world is in chaos, the bonds between individuals remain unbroken. Soldiers in the Continental Army, shivering in their winter camps at Valley Forge, wrote letters to their wives and sweethearts by the dim light of campfires. They didn't always call them Valentines, but they were written in the same ancient spirit, the spirit of reaching out through the dark and the cold to find comfort in the memory of another. After the birth of the United States, Valentine's Day began to spread across the states like a quiet wildfire. It was no longer just a tradition for the elite or the pious. It was becoming a holiday for the common man and the common woman. In the early 1800s, as the printing press became more common in American towns, local newspapers began to publish Valentine poems, riddles, and stories. The Americanization of the holiday was beginning in earnest. It was becoming more democratic, more inclusive, and more focused on the simple American idea of the pursuit of happiness. Think of the profound silence of a small American town on a snowy February night in the year 1820. The shops are closed, the horses are resting in their stables, and the only light comes from the glowing windows of the small houses. Inside, people are gathering around their wooden tables, sharing stories of the past and dreams of the future. The Valentine is no longer a secret kept from the authorities. It is a shared secret, a part of the cultural fabric of a young nation finding its own identity. It was during this time that the American people began to embrace the holiday as a way to celebrate friendship as much as romantic love, expanding the reach of Saint Valentine's legacy. For your audience in America, this chapter of history is the very foundation of their own experience. It is the story of how a Roman ritual, a medieval poem, and a Victorian obsession traveled 3,000 miles across a gray and stormy ocean to find a new home. It is a story of adaptation and survival. The American Valentine took the lace of London and the wit of the Old World and blended them into something uniquely American, something that was both deeply sentimental and remarkably hardworking. It was the precursor to the great industrial boom that would follow. As you drift closer to the soft, dark edge of sleep, imagine those wooden ships once more, their white sails filled with the steady wind of the Atlantic. Think of the millions of people who have crossed that ocean over the centuries, bringing their hearts, their hopes, and their histories with them in their luggage. Valentine's Day is a traveler. It is a survivor. It crossed the Atlantic not as a finished, polished product, but as a seed, an idea that love is the universal language that can bridge any distance, cross any ocean, and survive any winter, no matter how harsh. The Atlantic Ocean is quiet now, its waves whispering against the shores of history. The wooden ships have long since vanished beneath the waves or become silent museum pieces. The early colonies have grown into a vast, bustling, and modern nation, but the journey of the heart continues. Every February, we repeat the journey of those early settlers. We reach across the distance, whether it is across a quiet room or across a vast continent, to deliver our own paper heart. We are still the travelers, still the settlers, still the ones looking for connection in the wilderness of time. Feel the stillness of your own room. You are safe on the shores of the present, resting in the deep history of a holiday that traveled across the world to find you. The ocean is vast, but the human heart is stronger. The winter is long, but the Valentine is patient and enduring. You are quiet, you are safe, and you are part of a story that is as deep as the sea and as eternal as the stars. Sleep now as the soft, cool mists of the Atlantic carry you away into a dream of new worlds and old traditions. The journey is over, the home has been found, and the heart is finally, peacefully at rest. The mother of the American Valentine. Take a deep, slow, and rhythmic breath. Feel the cool air enter your lungs, and as you exhale, feel your body becoming weightless, drifting away from the rugged frontier and the wooden ships of the past. We are entering a new era, the mid-19th century, a time of rising cities, clattering carriages, and the birth of the American dream. We are traveling to Worcester, Massachusetts, in the year 1847. The air here smells of fresh paper, ink, and the crisp, winter atmosphere of New England. It is here that we meet a young woman who would change the landscape of American romance forever. This is the story of Esther Howland, the woman history remembers as the mother of the American Valentine, and the birth of an industry that turned a quiet tradition into a national phenomenon. Imagine a bright, sunlit room in a large brick house. Esther Howland, a recent graduate of Mount Holyoke Female Seminary, is sitting at a wooden table. Her father owns a large book and stationery store, and he has just handed her something that arrived from England, a Victorian Valentine, covered in delicate paper lace and silk flowers. In America at this time, Valentines were still largely handmade or imported at a great cost. They were rare, expensive treasures. But as Esther held that card in her hands, she didn't just see a message of love, she saw a vision. She saw a way to bring this beauty to every American home. She believed that elegance shouldn't be reserved only for the elite. Image a young Victorian woman in a simple dress, surrounded by stacks of lace, ribbons, and small colorful paper illustrations by a large window. As you listen to the steady, hypnotic drone of this history, think about the first steps of this industrial revolution. Esther didn't start with a factory, she started with a dream and a pair of scissors. She asked her father to order high-quality paper lace and floral scraps from England. She sat at her kitchen table and began to experiment. She layered the lace, she added small colored pictures of birds and flowers, and she created three-dimensional accordions that allowed the cards to stand up. These were not just cards, they were tiny architectural wonders of paper. She created a small collection of samples and gave them to her brother, a traveling salesman, to see if anyone in the local towns would be interested. She hoped for perhaps a few $100s in orders, but the American heart was ready. When her brother returned, he didn't have hundreds of dollars in orders, he had over $5,000 worth of requests. In the mid-19th century, this was a staggering sum. The demand for beauty, for connection, and for the American Valentine was overwhelming. Esther realized that she could no longer work alone at her kitchen table. She needed a system. She needed an assembly line of the heart. Esther Howland did something revolutionary for a woman of her time. She turned her home into a workshop and hired a group of young women from the neighborhood. This was the birth of the New England Valentine Company. Imagine the scene, a long, sun-drenched room filled with the soft rustle of paper and the quiet chatter of women. They sat at long tables, each with a specific task. One would cut the lace, another would glue the scraps, another would hand-paint the delicate silk ribbons, and another would write the verses. It was a rhythmic, peaceful process, a boring history of manual labor that produced objects of incredible beauty. Image an 1850s-style assembly line of women in long dresses, carefully assembling elaborate lace valentines in a bright room. Esther was a perfectionist. She introduced layers to the American Valentine. She used high-quality materials, fine lace, lithographed pictures, and even small pieces of real silk. She was the first to use mechanical parts in American cards, creating secret flaps that opened to reveal hidden messages. Her cards were known for their lace-like quality, so delicate that they looked as if they might blow away with a gentle breath. She was competing with the grand workshops of London, and she was winning. For your audience in America, Esther Howland is a symbol of entrepreneurship and creativity. She didn't just sell cards, she sold an experience. She understood that in a rapidly growing nation, people were looking for ways to stay connected to their families and loved ones. Her Valentines became a staple of the American February. By the 1850s, her business was grossing over $100,000 a year. She had turned a seasonal hobby into a massive, year-round industry, providing jobs for women and bringing a touch of Victorian elegance to the farthest reaches of the American frontier. Think of the silence of those winter evenings in Massachusetts, where the only sound was the scratching of pens as the final verses were added to the cards. Esther herself often oversaw the quality control, ensuring that every card that left her workshop was worthy of the name Valentine. She never married herself, yet she spent her entire life creating the tokens that would join thousands of others in marriage. She was the architect of American romance, a woman who built an empire out of paper and lace. Image an antique advertisement for Howland's celebrated Valentines, featuring images of cupids and ornate lace borders. As the decades passed, other companies began to emerge. inspired by Esther's success. The industry grew, and the handmade feel of the early Howland Valentines began to be replaced by faster, fully automated printing processes. But the foundation had been laid. Esther Howland had taught America how to celebrate Valentine's Day. She had taken the shadowy origins of Rome and the poetry of Chaucer and turned them into a tangible, beautiful product that anyone could hold in their hands. As you drift closer to the edge of sleep, imagine Esther's workshop one last time. The sun is setting, casting long, golden shadows across the tables covered in lace and silk. The women are packing the cards into wooden crates, ready to be shipped by train and carriage to every corner of the nation. The mother of the American Valentine has finished her work for the day. She has turned a simple paper heart into a national treasure. Feel the stillness of your own night. The industry that Esther started is now a global giant, but the essence remains the same. Every time you see a card with a lace border or a hidden message, you are seeing a piece of Esther Howland's dream. You are safe, you are quiet, and you are resting in the history of a woman who proved that beauty and business could go hand in hand. The workshops of Worcester are silent now. The lace is tucked away in museums, and the ink has long since dried. But the birth of an industry changed the way we say "I love you" forever. Sleep now, as the soft mists of the 19th century carry you away. The crates are packed, the post is ready, and the winter night is a gentle lullaby for a soul that has found its place in the great story of the American heart. Cupid's arrow goes commercial. Take a deep, slow, and calming breath. Feel the air move gently through your body, and as you exhale, imagine yourself drifting forward in time, leaving the handmade lace of Esther Howland behind. We are entering the 20th century, a world of rapid change, of glowing electric lights, of moving pictures, and of a new kind of magic known as mass production. The 19th century obsession with intricate, handmade treasures is evolving into something sleeker, faster, and more universal. This is the era of Cupid's arrow goes commercial, a time when Valentine's Day transformed from a local tradition into a global industry of greeting cards and chocolates. Imagine a large, modern printing house in the year 1910. The air is thick with the rhythmic, mechanical heartbeat of the presses, a steady thump-thump, thump-thump that sounds like a giant, metallic heart beating for the entire nation. Gone are the days of small workshops and hand-glued silk roses. Now massive rollers are turning, feeding endless ribbons of paper through plates of etched steel. The ink is no longer applied with a quill, but by hungry machines that can print thousands of cards in a single hour. This was the birth of the modern greeting card, and at the center of this revolution was a young man in Kansas City named Joyce Hall. Image, a vintage 1920s printing press with large rollers, producing bright red and white Valentine cards. As you listen to the steady, hypnotic drone of this history, think about the shift in the American spirit. The people of the early 20th century were busy. They were moving to the cities, working in factories, and traveling on trains. They still had the same deep need for connection, but they no longer had the hours of silence required to cut paper lace or write long, acrostic poems by candlelight. They needed a way to express their hearts that was both beautiful and efficient. Joyce Hall and his company, Hallmark, understood this. They introduced the folded card, a card that came in an envelope, providing a private space for a message while being easy to display on a mantelpiece. The greeting card became the new social currency. It was affordable, it was vibrant, and it was everywhere. The designs moved away from the complex, fragile dioramas of the Victorian era and toward a cleaner, more graphic style. We saw the rise of the iconic Cupid, the chubby, winged archer with his golden bow, who became the universal symbol of the holiday. The boring history of the greeting card is actually a history of how we simplified our symbols so that everyone, regardless of their background, could understand them in a single glance. But cards were only one half of this commercial boom. We must also turn our attention to a different kind of sensation, the taste and the scent of the 20th century Valentine. We are entering the world of the chocolate box. For centuries, chocolate had been a luxury of the elite, a bitter and expensive drink enjoyed in the palaces of Europe. But by the late 19th and early 20th centuries, men like Richard Cadbury and Milton Hershey had figured out how to turn cocoa into smooth, sweet solids. Image, a vintage red heart-shaped chocolate box with a silk ribbon sitting next to a glass of milk. In the year 1861, Richard Cadbury had a brilliant idea. He created a decorated box filled with chocolates, and he shaped that box like a heart. He knew that even after the chocolates were eaten, the box would be kept as a treasure chest for love letters and mementos. By the mid-20th century, the heart-shaped box had become an American icon. Think of the texture of that box, the red satin, the gold trim, and the way the lid fits perfectly over the base. Think of the sound of the cellophane crinkling as it is removed, a sound that signals a moment of indulgence and care. The chocolate boom was a masterpiece of marketing. It linked the sweetness of the heart to the sweetness of the palate. It taught us that love was something that could be tasted, something that melted away, leaving a lingering memory of warmth. In the 1920s and 30s, chocolate companies began to compete to create the most elaborate Valentine assortments. They filled their boxes with caramels, nuts, and creams, each one a tiny, edible landscape of affection. For your audience in America, this was the era when Valentine's Day became a part of the American lifestyle. It was no longer just for lovers, it was for children in schools who decorated shoeboxes to receive small, colorful classroom valentines. It was for friends, for parents, and for neighbors. The industry made it easy for everyone to participate. By the 1950s, Valentine's Day was a juggernaut of the American economy, a day when billions of cards were sent and millions of pounds of chocolate were consumed. Image, a 1950s candy shop window filled with heart-shaped boxes and red streamers. Think of the silence of a modern grocery store aisle in early February, where rows upon rows of red boxes and bright cards wait for the rush. This is the boring history of the commercial age, the logistics of love. Behind every card is a designer, a writer, and a printer. Behind every chocolate is a farmer, a refiner, and a chocolatier. Cupid's arrow had become a global supply chain, a vast network of people working together to ensure that no one was forgotten on the 14th of February. As you drift closer to the edge of sleep, imagine the steady hum of the printing presses once more. Imagine the smooth, dark river of chocolate flowing into the heart-shaped molds. The world has become a busy place, but the intent remains the same as it was in the Roman cave or the medieval meadow. We are still looking for ways to reach out. We are still using symbols and sweets to tell each other that we matter. The commercial boom didn't destroy the spirit of Valentine's Day. It simply gave it a louder, more colorful voice. Feel the stillness of your own night. The factories are quiet for now, and the store shelves are resting under the moonlight. You are safe, you are quiet, and you are resting in a history that has turned ancient secrets into shared traditions. The cards are printed, the boxes are tied with ribbons, and the heart is finally, peacefully at rest. The 20th century is a long, slow dream of progress and sweetness. Sleep now, as the soft crinkle of the past carries you away. The industry is at peace, the symbols are familiar, and the night is a gentle, velvet lullaby for a soul that finds comfort in the common threads of human connection. Global whispers of love. Take a deep, slow, and rhythmic breath. Feel the air as it travels like a gentle, cooling mist through your lungs, and as you exhale, imagine your spirit lifting, rising high above the quiet American streets and crossing the vast, shimmering oceans. We are embarking on a journey of global whispers of love, exploring how the seeds of Valentine's Day, once rooted in Rome and nurtured in the West, have been carried by the winds of culture to every corner of the earth. We are entering a world where the American version of the holiday, the cards, the chocolates, and the cupids, has met with the ancient and unique traditions of other lands, creating a beautiful, often surprising, tapestry of human connection. Imagine the quiet, snow-dusted mountains of Japan in the mid-20th century. Here, the American influence arrived like a soft, curious breeze, but in the land of the rising sun, the holiday took a fascinating, inverted turn. Unlike in the West, where men often lead the romantic gestures, in Japan, February the 14th became a day for women to express their hearts. But this was not just about romance, it was a ritual of social harmony. They introduced the concept of jiri choco, or obligation chocolate. Imagine the slow, careful process of a woman choosing different types of chocolate, some for her true love, and others, more simple, for her colleagues and superiors. It was a boring history of social etiquette, a way of smoothing the edges of daily life with a small, sweet gesture. Image, a beautiful Japanese box of chocolates wrapped in traditional patterned paper with a small silk knot. As you listen to the steady, hypnotic drone of this history, think about how this tradition created a second holiday, exactly 1 month later, known as White Day. On March the 14th, the men are expected to return the favor, giving gifts that are white in color, marshmallows, white chocolate, or light-colored jewelry. This rhythmic exchange, this back and forth of kindness, turned the single day of Saint Valentine into a 2-month-long dialogue of the heart. It shows us how a global influence can be reshaped by local values of balance and reciprocity. Now let your mind drift to the vibrant, sun-drenched streets of Brazil. Here, the whispers of love wait until the month of June. Because February is often filled with the wild, loud energy of the carnival, the Brazilians celebrate Dia dos Namorados, or Lover's Day, on June the 12th. This is the eve of Saint Anthony's Day, the patron saint of marriage. Here, the American style of gift-giving is blended with religious folk traditions. Young women might perform simpatias or small rituals to find a good husband. The air is warm, the music is soft, and the holiday is a bridge between the sacred and the romantic. Image, a colorful Brazilian street decorated with banners and flowers under a warm evening sky. In South Korea, the tradition has grown even further into a monthly cycle of days of love. There is a day for roses, a day for kisses, and even a Black Day in April, where those who did not receive gifts on Valentine's Day gather to eat dark noodles and celebrate their independence. This is the commercialization of love, taken to its most elaborate extreme, yet beneath the surface, it is a way for a fast-paced modern society to ensure that there is always a moment scheduled for connection, for laughter, and for shared experiences. As we move toward the quiet, misty villages of Wales, we find a tradition that predates the American boom. Here, they celebrate St. Dwynwen's Day in January. Instead of paper cards, they have the love spoon. Imagine a craftsman sitting by a fire, slowly carving a single piece of wood into an intricate spoon decorated with hearts, keys, and bells. Each symbol has a meaning. The key represents the key to the heart. The bell represents a wedding. This is a slow, boring, and beautiful art form. It reminds us that before the world was connected by the internet, it was connected by the hand of the maker. Image, a hand-carved wooden Welsh love spoon with intricate heart and chain designs. For your audience in America, seeing how the world has adopted and adapted their traditions is a reminder of the power of soft influence. The American Valentine, the red heart and the chocolate box, has become a global language, a set of symbols that a person in Paris, Nairobi, or Seoul can instantly recognize. But the true beauty lies in the whisper, the way each culture adds its own dialect to that language. In Italy, they might share baci perugina, chocolates with small love notes hidden inside. In Denmark, they might send gikebrev, or joke letters, where the sender signs their name in dots, and if the recipient guesses the name, they win an Easter egg. Think of the silence of the world at night. In every time zone, there is a heart that is waiting for a sign. Valentine's Day has become a global pulse, a rhythmic reminder that despite our different languages, our different histories, and our different landscapes, we all share the same fundamental desire to be seen and to be cherished. The global whispers are the sounds of billions of people reaching out through the dark to find one another. As you drift closer to the soft edge of sleep, imagine the map of the world glowing with tiny sparks of light. Each spark is a gesture of love, a spoon being carved in Wales, a box of giri choco being wrapped in Tokyo, a sympatia being whispered in Brazil, and a card being addressed in America. The world is a large place, but tonight it feels small and connected. We are all part of the same long, slow dream of Saint Valentine. Feel the stillness of your own room. The global journey is coming to an end. The oceans are calm, the mountains are silent, and the cities are resting under the stars. You are safe, you are quiet, and you are resting in a world that, for all its complexity, still takes the time to whisper of love. The traditions have been shared, the influences have been woven together. And the heart is finally, peacefully at rest. The night is a universal blanket, covering every culture and every land. Sleep now, as the global whispers fade into a soft, melodic lullaby. The world is at peace, the secrets are shared, and the history of the heart is a gentle, eternal shadow that watches over us all. Global whispers of love. Take a deep, slow, and rhythmic breath. Feel the air as it travels like a gentle, cooling mist through your lungs, and as you exhale, imagine your spirit lifting, rising high above the quiet American streets and crossing the vast, shimmering oceans. We are embarking on a journey of global whispers of love, exploring how the seeds of Valentine's Day, once rooted in Rome and nurtured in the West, have been carried by the winds of culture to every corner of the earth. We are entering a world where the American version of the holiday, the cards, the chocolates, and the cupids, has met with the ancient and unique traditions of other lands, creating a beautiful, often surprising, tapestry of human connection. Imagine the quiet, snow-dusted mountains of Japan in the mid-20th century. Here, the American influence arrived like a soft, curious breeze, but in the land of the rising sun, the holiday took a fascinating, inverted turn. Unlike in the West, where men often lead the romantic gestures, in Japan, February the 14th became a day for women to express their hearts. But this was not just about romance, it was a ritual of social harmony. They introduced the concept of jiri choco, or obligation chocolate. Imagine the slow, careful process of a woman choosing different types of chocolate, some for her true love, and others, more simple, for her colleagues and superiors. It was a boring history of social etiquette, a way of smoothing the edges of daily life with a small, sweet gesture. As you listen to the steady, hypnotic drone of this history, think about how this tradition created a second holiday, exactly 1 month later, known as White Day. On March the 14th, the men are expected to return the favor, giving gifts that are white in color, marshmallows, white chocolate, or light-colored jewelry. This rhythmic exchange, this back and forth of kindness, turned the single day of Saint Valentine into a 2-month-long dialogue of the heart. It shows us how a global influence can be reshaped by local values of balance and reciprocity. Now let your mind drift to the vibrant, sun-drenched streets of Brazil. Here, the whispers of love wait until the month of June. Because February is often filled with the wild, loud energy of the carnival, the Brazilians celebrate Dia dos Namorados, or Lover's Day, on June the 12th. This is the eve of Saint Anthony's Day, the patron saint of marriage. Here, the American style of gift-giving is blended with religious folk traditions. Young women might perform simpatias or small rituals to find a good husband. The air is warm, the music is soft, and the holiday is a bridge between the sacred and the romantic. In South Korea, the tradition has grown even further into a monthly cycle of days of love. There is a day for roses, a day for kisses, and even a Black Day in April, where those who did not receive gifts on Valentine's Day gather to eat dark noodles and celebrate their independence. This is the commercialization of love, taken to its most elaborate extreme, yet beneath the surface, it is a way for a fast-paced modern society to ensure that there is always a moment scheduled for connection, for laughter, and for shared experiences. As we move toward the quiet, misty villages of Wales, we find a tradition that predates the American boom. Here, they celebrate St. Dwynwen's Day in January. Instead of paper cards, they have the love spoon. Imagine a craftsman sitting by a fire, slowly carving a single piece of wood into an intricate spoon decorated with hearts, keys, and bells. Each symbol has a meaning. The key represents the key to the heart. The bell represents a wedding. This is a slow, boring, and beautiful art form. It reminds us that before the world was connected by the internet, it was connected by the hand of the maker. For your audience in America, seeing how the world has adopted and adapted their traditions is a reminder of the power of soft influence. The American Valentine, the red heart and the chocolate box, has become a global language, a set of symbols that a person in Paris, Nairobi, or Seoul can instantly recognize. But the true beauty lies in the whisper, the way each culture adds its own dialect to that language. In Italy, they might share baci perugina, chocolates with small love notes hidden inside. In Denmark, they might send gækkebrev, or joke letters, where the sender signs their name in dots, and if the recipient guesses the name, they win an Easter egg. Think of the silence of the world at night. In every time zone, there is a heart that is waiting for a sign. Valentine's Day has become a global pulse, a rhythmic reminder that despite our different languages, our different histories, and our different landscapes, we all share the same fundamental desire to be seen and to be cherished. The global whispers are the sounds of billions of people reaching out through the dark to find one another. As you drift closer to the soft edge of sleep, imagine the map of the world glowing with tiny sparks of light. Each spark is a gesture of love, a spoon being carved in Wales, a box of Jiri Choco being wrapped in Tokyo, a sympatia being whispered in Brazil, and a card being addressed in America. The world is a large place, but tonight it feels small and connected. We are all part of the same long, slow dream of Saint Valentine. Feel the stillness of your own room. The global journey is coming to an end. The oceans are calm, the mountains are silent, and the cities are resting under the stars. You are safe, you are quiet, and you are resting in a world that, for all its complexity, still takes the time to whisper of love. The traditions have been shared, the influences have been woven together, and the heart is finally, peacefully at rest. The night is a universal blanket, covering every culture and every land. Sleep now, as the global whispers fade into a soft, melodic lullaby. The world is at peace, the secrets are shared, and the history of the heart is a gentle, eternal shadow that watches over us all. Beyond the flowers. Take a deep, slow, and restorative breath. Feel the air enter your lungs like a cool, gentle mist flowing over a quiet lake. As you exhale, feel your body becoming heavier, sinking deeper and deeper into the soft, welcoming embrace of your bed. We are leaving the global celebrations and the colorful traditions of different lands behind. We are turning our gaze inward, moving away from the external world of cards, lace, and chocolate, and entering the quiet, complex landscape of the human mind. This is the story of Beyond the Flowers, an exploration of the psychological impact of having a single day dedicated to affection, and how this ancient tradition ripples through our brains, our emotions, and our very sense of being. Imagine the human brain as a vast, intricate garden of neural pathways. In this garden, certain chemicals act as the sunlight and the rain, helping our feelings to bloom and grow. When we think of Valentine's Day, we often think of grand gestures, but the boring history of the holiday is actually happening at a microscopic level. It is a story of hormones and neurotransmitters. When we receive a token of affection, a card, a whisper, or even a simple smile, our brain releases a flood of oxytocin, often called the cuddle hormone or the bonding molecule. This chemical is the invisible thread that weaves people together, creating a sense of trust, safety, and belonging. Image, a soft, glowing abstract representation of neural pathways, pulsing with gentle pink and gold light. As you listen to the steady, hypnotic drone of this history, think about the power of recognition. Psychologically, humans have a deep, primal need to be seen by others. Valentine's Day serves as a cultural ritual that mandates this recognition. Even if the gesture is small, the act of someone taking the time to acknowledge your presence in their life triggers a release of dopamine, the brain's reward system. It creates a spark of joy that can cut through the gray monotony of a long winter. This is the science of why a simple paper heart can feel so heavy with meaning. But the psychological impact of a day dedicated to affection is not always a simple upward curve of happiness. Because the holiday carries such high cultural expectations, it also creates a unique type of emotional pressure. Psychologists often observe a phenomenon known as social comparison during the month of February. In our modern, connected world, we often measure our own internal reality against the polished, external highlights of others. This can lead to a sense of expectation fatigue. The boring history of the mind tells us that for every peak of joy, there is a valley of reflection. The holiday forces us to evaluate our relationships, our social standing, and our own self-worth. Image, a single, warm light reflecting in a still pool of water, surrounded by shadows. For your audience in America, where individualism and emotional intelligence are highly valued, this chapter of the Valentine story is deeply relevant. We have learned to use the holiday as a check-in for our emotional health. We have started to understand the importance of self-affection, the idea that the psychological benefits of the day are not just for those in pairs. By directing kindness toward ourselves, We stimulate the same neural pathways that are activated when we receive love from others. This is the rise of the Self-Valentine, a psychological shift that emphasizes resilience and internal peace over external validation. Think of the silence of a quiet evening of reflection. There is a profound beauty in understanding why we feel the way we do. Valentine's Day acts as a time marker in our psychological year. It is a moment where we pause to acknowledge the people who make our lives meaningful. This act of gratitude is one of the most powerful psychological tools we possess. Studies show that expressing gratitude can lower stress, improve sleep, and increase overall life satisfaction. The holiday, in its most basic form, is a global exercise in collective gratitude. Image, a soft focus image of a hand writing slowly in a journal by the light of a small lamp. As the hours of February the 14th tick by, the brain undergoes a subtle shift. The anticipation of the day gives way to the post-holiday reflection. This is a quiet time when the mind processes the connections made or missed. It is a time of emotional digestion. The psychological impact beyond the flowers is the lasting sense of security that comes from knowing we are part of a community, a family, or a partnership. It is the social glue that keeps the fabric of society from fraying. Think of the steady, rhythmic pulse of a world that takes one day out of 365 to focus entirely on the heart. Even for those who find the day difficult, the psychological impact is undeniable. It forces a conversation with the self. It demands that we acknowledge our need for connection. It reminds us that we are not islands, but part of a vast, interconnected ocean of human emotion. The boring history of psychology is the study of these invisible tides. Image, a peaceful, empty beach at twilight, with small waves gently washing over the sand. As you drift closer to the soft, dark edge of sleep, imagine your mind as a quiet library. The books on the shelves are your memories of affection, the cards you've kept, the kind words you've heard, and the moments of connection you've shared. Valentine's Day is just one book in that library, but it is one that we all read together. The psychological impact of the day is the realization that love, in all its forms, is the foundation of our mental and emotional landscape. Feel the stillness of your own room. The brain is slowing down now, its neural pathways quieting as you prepare for rest. The affection molecules have done their work. The stress of expectation is fading, replaced by the calm of the night. You are safe, you are quiet, and you are resting in a deep understanding of your own heart. The flowers may fade, the chocolates may be eaten, and the cards may be tucked away, but the psychological legacy of the day remains as a steady, warm glow in the back of your mind. Sleep now as the soft mists of psychological peace carry you away into a dream of balance and belonging. The garden of the mind is quiet, the pathways are still, and the heart is finally, peacefully at rest. The eternal legacy. Take a final, deep and slow breath. Feel the stillness of the room wrapping around you like a heavy velvet blanket. We have traveled across 2,000 years of human history, moving from the blood-stained caves of ancient Rome to the digital glow of the modern world. We have seen martyrs in the shadows, poets in the meadows, and lace in the factories. Now, as our journey nears its end, we find ourselves standing at the edge of the present moment, looking back at the long, winding path behind us. This is the eternal legacy, the final reflection on why a story born in mystery and built on fragments still holds the heart of the world in its grip. Why, in an age of science and speed, do we still stop to celebrate a 2,000-year-old mystery every 14th of February? Imagine the world today, a world of satellites, instant messages, and artificial intelligence. We are a people of data and logic, and yet when the calendar turns to February, something ancient stirs within us. The boring history of Valentine's Day is not just a collection of dates. It is a testament to the endurance of the human spirit. We celebrate this day because, at our core, we have not changed as much as we like to think. Whether it is a Roman citizen seeking purification, a medieval knight seeking honor, or a modern person seeking connection, the underlying need is the same. We need to know that we are not alone. We need rituals to mark the passage of time and the depth of our feelings. Image, a montage of ancient ruins blending into a modern city skyline at sunset, with a single red rose glowing in the center. As you listen to the steady, rhythmic drone of this final chapter, think about the power of persistence. A tradition does not survive for 20 centuries by accident. Valentine's Day has survived because it is remarkably adaptable. It has worn the mask of a pagan festival, the robes of a saint, the armor of a knight, and the lace of an industry. It has evolved to fit every era, yet its heart has remained untouched. It is a mirror that reflects the values of each age back to itself. Today, its legacy is one of universal affection, a day that has expanded to hold the love of friends, families, and the self. The mystery of Saint Valentine himself is a crucial part of this legacy. If we knew everything about him, if we had his exact birth date, his height, his favorite food, the legend would be finite. It would be a historical fact, cold and static. But because he remains a saint in the shadows, he is infinite. He can be whoever we need him to be. He is the symbol of the individual standing up against the empire. He is the voice of the prisoner reaching out to a friend. The legacy of the mystery is that it allows us to fill the gaps with our own hopes and our own stories. Image an old, leather-bound book with blank pages, sitting under a window with soft moonlight falling on it. For your audience in America, the eternal legacy of Valentine's Day is a story of continuity. In a nation that is always looking toward the future, this holiday provides a vital link to the deep past. It is a reminder that we are part of a long chain of human experience. When you send a card, you are echoing the gesture of the martyr. When you write a poem, you are joining the parliament of Chaucer's birds. When you gift chocolate, you are participating in the sweetness of a century of tradition. The legacy is the realization that we are never truly starting from scratch. We are carrying the torch of those who came before us. Think of the silence that will fall when this story ends. In that silence, the legacy continues. We celebrate because the heart requires a holiday. We celebrate because the winter requires a fire. We celebrate because the mystery is more beautiful than the fact. The boring history of the world is actually a series of quiet miracles, and Valentine's Day is one of the greatest. It is the miracle of an idea that refused to die, a name that refused to be forgotten, and a feeling that refuses to be silenced. Image a peaceful, snowy forest where the sun is just beginning to rise, casting a warm pink glow on the trees. As you drift closer to the final, deep sleep, let the weight of history settle peacefully upon you. You are a part of this legacy now. By listening to this story, by remembering these names, and by feeling the rhythm of these centuries, you have added your own thread to the tapestry. The 14th of February is no longer just a date on a calendar. It is a bridge. It is a bridge across time, across oceans, and across the silence between hearts. Feel the stillness of your own space. The journey is complete. The martyrs are at rest. The poets have laid down their quills. The factories are silent, and the global whispers have faded into the night. You are safe, you are quiet, and you are resting in a history that is 2,000 years deep and as fresh as tomorrow morning. The eternal legacy is not in the books or the museums. It is in the quiet pulse of your own heart. Sleep now as the final mists of this long story carry you away. The mystery remains, the tradition endures, and the night is a gentle, velvet lullaby for a soul that has found its place in the grand design of time. The winter night is long and peaceful. The stars are watching over the world, and the story of love, in all its forms, is finally, peacefully at rest.